Tonight we're going to set sail into the grimy, chaotic, and utterly miserable world of historical pirates. And I'm giving you fair warning right now, you probably won't survive this. You might be imagining some kind of wild adventure, with glittering treasure chests and a talking parrot perched on your shoulder. But the real truth, it's so much darker, so much smellier, and it is filled with way more screaming than you ever signed up for. So before you get too comfortable, maybe take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And go ahead and drop your city and whatever time it is in the comments. I really do love seeing who's staying up late with me. Now dim those lights, maybe click on a fan for that soft background noise, and let's just ease into tonight's journey together. It all starts with a mistake, or maybe just a string of bad luck, or perhaps it was just about being in the wrong place right when the wrong ship decided to dock. You're likely already a sailor, working the merchant routes or hauling heavy cargo through the sun-scorched Caribbean. Life isn't what you'd call good, but at least there's a rhythm to it, a predictability. But then a shadow starts to grow on the horizon. It's a black flag, or maybe it's just a ship that looks like it's barely holding itself together, but somehow still moves as if it's possessed. You don't even get a real chance to panic before the roar of cannon fire slams right into your hull. Wooden splinters fly through the air like razors. You hear your captain let out a sharp scream, and then they board. Pirates are not gentle people. They swarm over the rails screaming curses, waving around their rusty cutlasses and firing off pistols that smell like burning metal and thick gunpowder. You don't try to fight back. Most people don't. You just drop your knife, throw your hands in the air, and hope. You hope that maybe they'll let you live. Maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones. But out here, lucky means something entirely different. The luckiest among you get press-ganged, dragged kicking and screaming onto the pirate ship, shoved down below the decks, and told by your new crew, go on and say goodbye to your old life. You've just been forcibly recruited into one of the most brutal jobs on the entire planet. They strip you of your clothes. Those belong to the pirates now. You're handed a crusty old shirt, some pants that are either too tight or too loose, and a pair of boots that squish with every step you take. You are now officially part of the crew, which for the most part just means scrubbing decks, taking whatever orders are thrown at you, and never, ever questioning the guy wearing the biggest hat. Some men actually beg to join a crew like this, hopping for a life of gold and freedom. You, however, didn't get that choice. You're still shaking from the violence of the attack when someone smacks you hard on the back and calls you green meat. It is not meant as a compliment. Your first night on board is absolutely miserable. The ship rocks without end, like it's actively trying to toss you into the dark sea. You have to sleep on a damp wooden board in a room that smells like a combination of moldy bread and stale sweat. The man near you is snoring so loudly you're pretty sure he might be dying. You're hungry, but you can't seem to find the kitchen, mainly because there isn't one. There's just a man they call Cookie, and Cookie spends his days boiling random bits of animals into something that smells distinctly like defeat. You're starting to realize that this isn't some grand adventure. It's a trap. Historically speaking, a great many pirates were forced into the life this way, pressed into service right after their ship was captured. A famous example would be Captain Kidd's crew, where many of the men later claimed they were forced to join against their will. Once you were aboard, refusing to participate wasn't really an option you could consider. Saying no would often mean being unceremoniously tossed overboard, or worse, and there was certainly no polite way to hand in your resignation letter. The pirate life was for life, or at least until something sharper came along and ended it. The pirate ship has its own set of rules, of course. Once you're officially considered part of the crew, you're expected to pull your own weight or else. There's absolutely no room for slackers or complainers. That one guy who moans a little too much. He gets tied to the mast and whipped until his back looks like a plate of lasagna. You learn to keep your mouth shut and your head down. You either learn fast or you suffer. And then there's the strange part. Despite all the violence and the chaos, pirate crews had this twisted sense of fairness. They had something called the Articles of Agreement, which was like a kind of pirate constitution. Everybody got a share of the plunder. Big decisions were often made democratically. The captain could even be voted out of his position. It's like having the worst job imaginable combined with some kind of bizarre workplace equity. Except, your coworkers all smell like dead fish, and they prefer to solve their disputes with daggers. But don't get your hopes up just yet. That share of the plunder they promised you, it comes with a pretty big catch. You don't get a single coin until the next successful raid. And absolutely no one is promising when that's going to be. For now, you're just another body, another pair of hands helping the ship limp its way through hostile waters. And trust me, those waters are filled with things that want to kill you. Hurricanes, naval ships, other pirates. Even your own ship seems hell-bent on falling apart right underneath your feet. There's a saying on board. The sea takes what it wants. The man who teaches it to you is missing 2 of his fingers and has a tooth that whistles whenever he talks. You ask him what happened to his fingers. Bad captain, he says, and just leaves it at that. Not everything about how pirates were recruited is completely agreed upon. Historians are still debating just how common press ganging really was. Some of them believe that most pirates joined up voluntarily, driven by their own desperation or enticed by the promise of freedom and all that loot. Others argue it was more often a matter of coercion, especially during the golden age of piracy, when men had far fewer options, and the navies treated their own crews like livestock. But in your case, voluntary it was not. You spend your days mopping, climbing, hauling on heavy ropes, and pretending that you're not secretly crying. You're hungry all the time. Someone near your hammock coughs up blood. The ship rocks endlessly, and you start to dream of dry land. Not even a beautiful beach, just solid ground that doesn't sway back and forth like a drunk man. You catch yourself just staring at the horizon, wondering what might happen if you just decided to jump. It's a dangerous thought, but it certainly won't be your last, because this is only the beginning. You are officially a pirate now. And if you think it's going to get any better from here, oh, you sweet, naive little land lover. There comes a moment, maybe after a few days, where it finally, truly hits you. You are never going home. Not for real. Not back to your town, your family, your bed with an actual mattress. All of that is gone. Whatever vague idea of escape you might have been holding onto is evaporating fast. You're miles and miles from any coast, completely surrounded by criminals and living inside what is essentially a drifting coffin. The pirate ship is your new universe now, and everything you once knew and loved is as distant and unreachable as the moon. The thing is, you hadn't ever realized just how attached you were to the feeling of land. You start to miss the weirdest things, like being able to walk in a straight line, grass, birds that don't screech like they're being murdered, the simple taste of fresh bread, even the sound of distant church bells. The sort of things you used to completely ignore now haunt your memory like a lullaby you can't quite hum the right tune to anymore. The ship is constantly rocking, and your legs never quite seem to adjust. You stumble into walls, you trip over ropes, and at least once a day, you swear the floor is moving on its own just to mess with you. Spoiler alert, it is. You find out very quickly that privacy is a total myth. Everyone is packed in together below deck, all breathing the same sour, recycled air. You're sleeping shoulder to shoulder on creaky wooden boards or in hammocks that reek of mildew. Conversations are always happening around you. Arguments, groans, muttered threats, dreams yelled out in the middle of sleep. You have never heard so much snoring in your entire life. And the air, it smells like old cheese that was left out in the sun, with just a whisper of wet dog and a bold splash of raw sewage. If hell has a specific scent, it probably took notes from the inside of a pirate ship. You try to make some friends, or at least you try to avoid making enemies. There's Pegleg Joe, who lost his eye in a bar brawl but insists it was a duel with a Spanish assassin. There's Knuckles, a hulking brute of a man who collects other people's teeth. You don't ask him why. And then there's a guy they call Whisper who is always smiling and never says a single word. He creeps you out more than anyone. But it turns out you're the weird one for not having a nickname yet. That'll come, usually right after you do something deeply humiliating. Meal times are, let's just call them formative experiences. The ship's stores include salted meat that is more bone than actual flesh, hardtack biscuits with bugs baked right into them, and something that might have once been pickled cabbage before it died a second time. There's also rum, lots and lots of rum, not to celebrate with, but to numb yourself. You learn fast that everyone here drinks not for fun, but as a way to cope. The rations are so foul you actually find yourself feeling jealous of the rats. They look healthier than most of the crew. Fresh water is strictly rationed and it tastes like rust and regret. Washing. Don't make everyone laugh. You're not bathing out here unless you count the occasional rainstorm. And even then, you have to fight 10 other guys for a decent soak. Your clothes haven't been fully dry since the day you got here. Your socks are a biological hazard. You start to itch in places you didn't even know could itch. Welcome to the glamorous life of a seaborne outlaw. Here's a little historical gem for you. Pirates actually had some of the strictest codes when it came to sharing out their supplies. Despite their reputations, many crews kept a very careful inventory and were ferocious when it came to rationing. Wasting water could get you flogged. Stealing food could get you killed. On some ships, you'd be marooned, just left on a barren rock with a pistol and a single shot, just in case starvation started to get boring. So no, it's not some kind of endless buffet of rum and roasted pigs. It's much more like the world's most dysfunctional summer camp, run by angry drunks with knives. And then, of course, there are the chores. Everyone has to pull their weight. That includes cleaning the deck with sand and seawater, patching up the sails while trying to balance on swaying masts, and scrubbing out the bilge, which is the lowest part of the ship where all the liquid waste eventually settles. It's every bit as pleasant as it sounds. You spend hours down there, knee-deep in muck, scooping out a thick sludge that smells like rotten despair. One of the guys down there with you says he once saw a crab with 3 eyes. You don't know whether you should believe him or just start to cry. Despite all of this, you start to understand something strange. The ship is a world of its own, a terrible one, but still a functioning system. Everyone has a job, a rank, a place. The captain barks out orders and always gets the best food. The quartermaster handles all the disputes and hands out the punishment. The rest of the crew just follows their lead and tries not to die. There's a rhythm to it, a dark, sweaty rhythm that slowly starts to worm its way into your very bones. But you can't seem to shake the loneliness. Out here, time itself is slippery. The days just blend into nights and you sometimes forget what month it is. There's no calendar, no real routine to follow, just an endless ocean and a horizon that refuses to come any closer. You start counting the stars at night, giving them names inside your head. You talk to the sea sometimes, out loud, just so you can hear your own voice. If the sea ever talks back, well, let's just hope that's the sleep deprivation. Scholars are still arguing over whether pirates truly felt the kind of freedom that modern minds like to romanticize. Some claim the open sea gave them a liberty that was unlike anything the mainland could ever offer. No kings, no taxes, no rules but the ones they made for themselves. Others will point out that being hunted by every single navy in the world while being stuck on a disease-ridden vessel with a bunch of sociopaths isn't exactly liberating. But to the average press-ganged sailor like yourself, freedom feels a lot like imprisonment, just with a lot more screaming and a lot fewer walls. One of the strangest facts about pirate life is that many pirates actually miss their life on land, not for their family or for peace, but for the simple comfort of just being bored. Out here, you're either terrified, exhausted, or sore. Sometimes you're all three at once. You find yourself dreaming about boredom now, about a day with absolutely nothing to do but sit. That would feel like heaven. As night falls once again, and you curl up on your plank of misery, trying your best not to touch the guy who is drooling right beside you, you find yourself whispering the same 3 words over and over again. Please don't sink. Because if this ship goes down, you won't last 5 minutes in the sea. And that, in a way, would actually be a mercy. By your 3rd week aboard this pirate ship, assuming you haven't been stabbed or thrown overboard or crushed underneath a collapsing mast, you start to realize that the absolute worst part of life at sea isn't the constant fear. It isn't even the ever-present threat of violence. It's the food, or rather, what passes for food. Your body is already in protest, your stomach constantly growling like something is trying to crawl its way out. Every single meal time is a gamble, and the house always seems to win. You line up with the rest of the crew, bowl in hand, just hopping for something that might be edible. What you get instead is a ladle full of a brown-gray mush that has the consistency of wet ash and a smell that could knock out a goat. You don't ask what's in it. Nobody does. Asking questions is a fast track to being told to go and lick barnacles instead. You spoon the stuff into your mouth and you try with all your might not to gag. It's salty and sour and chewy in all the wrong ways. You chew on something that feels crunchy and you make a conscious decision not to investigate. That way lies madness. Then there's the hardtack. It's the official bread of pirates and a cruel, cruel joke that must have been invented by some sadistic baker back on land. These bricks of flour and water have been sitting in the barrel for so long that they've practically fossilized. You try to take a bite and you nearly chip a tooth. Eventually, you learn the trick. You have to soak it in water or rum, then just suck on it until it finally surrenders. Except even then, it comes with its own special surprise. Maggots. Little white ones squirming happily inside the biscuit like it's some kind of a spa for them. Some of the guys pick them out. Most don't even bother. Protein is protein, right? Fresh food is a complete fantasy. The fruits and vegetables all vanished weeks ago. The meat is salted into something that's almost jerky, and it's stored in barrels that smell even worse than the bilge. Water is rationed so carefully that trying to bathe with it would probably get you stabbed. You drink beer or watered down rum instead, which means you're constantly buzzed, mildly dehydrated, and getting scurvier by the day. Not that you know what that is yet. The first signs are just bleeding gums and some weird bruises that appear out of nowhere. The fun part comes later. To make things extra festive, you've got a cook named Black Tooth who seems to take a personal pride in making every single thing taste like regret. He's missing most of his teeth, including the ones in the back that actually make chewing possible. He uses a knife that looks like it was fished out of a volcano, and he seasons everything with something he calls ship's spice, which is probably just ground up rope and sea salt. He'll grunt at you if you ask for a second helping, and he will throw a ladle at your head if you dare to criticize his stew. It still might be the most stable relationship you have on this ship. Pirates historically had a very real and serious problem with nutrition. Their diet was severely lacking in essential vitamins. Especially vitamin C. Scurvy was practically a rite of passage. A sailor's gums would swell up and bleed, their teeth would fall out, their joints ached constantly, and any wounds they had refused to heal. In the more advanced cases, the flesh on their legs would actually blacken and begin to rot. And yet, many crews didn't even know what caused it. Some of them blamed the sea air. Others thought it was some kind of punishment from God. All you know is that your teeth feel weird and your gums have started to itch. That can't be good. And then, of course, there's the booze. Grog, they call it. It's a mix of water, rum, and sometimes, if you're really, really lucky, some citrus. Spoiler, you're not lucky. The purpose of grog is less about enjoyment and more about killing off whatever bacteria is living in the water. It does the job. It also gets people just drunk enough to forget how utterly miserable they are, which is apparently an unofficial survival strategy around here. The downside is that everyone is slightly tipsy all of the time, which makes climbing the rigging in high winds, let's just say, an eventful experience. You find yourself craving the strangest things. Apples, fresh bread, cheese. You actually dream about cheese, not even a fancy cheese, just a sad little wedge of anything that didn't come out of a barrel. One of the guys starts talking in his sleep about buttered toast. You cry a little just listening to him. Butter. What even is butter anymore? Did it ever really exist, or was it just a dream that someone wrote down? Food fights aren't playful out here. They're desperate. Someone gets caught hoarding dried fruit and he ends up getting locked in the brig for a week. You didn't even know the ship had a brig. It's basically just a cupboard that leaks. And the rats in there seem to have tattoos. The thief comes out of there looking thin, twitchy, and he's missing half of an eyebrow. No one talks about it, but everyone glances at the food barrels a little more suspiciously after that. There's a strange psychological shift that happens after you've had enough bad meals. You stop seeing food as food. It just becomes fuel, a grim necessity. You eat what you have to, and you try your best not to taste it. You chew without any enthusiasm, like someone who is clocking in for a shift they absolutely hate. All the joy gets sucked right out of it, replaced with a cold calculation. Will this make me sick? Will I regret this later? Can I keep it down? Now here's a fun fringe fact for you. Some pirates believed that eating rats could stave off starvation and sometimes even scurvy. Rats, after all, ate just about anything, including spoiled fruit that might have still had some traces of vitamin C. So, yes, eating a rat could technically be considered healthy. There are stories, possibly exaggerated, of crews chasing rats around the hold like it was some kind of sport. On really desperate voyages, they'd be considered a delicacy. You haven't seen anyone eat a rat yet, but you've definitely seen some people eyeing them for a little too long. As if the food itself wasn't cruel enough, the preparation methods are also delightfully medieval. There's no real stove, just a firebox that's set on some bricks in the galley, and that's only when it's safe enough to use fire at all. On stormy days, you're stuck with cold hardtack and sour beer. On good days, you might get some boiled fish, but good luck finding fish that doesn't just taste like sea water and sadness. Scholars are still arguing about how much pirate crews actually suffered from malnutrition versus how much of it was exaggerated in sailor legends. Some accounts mention thriving crews full of healthy, bronzed rogues feasting on fresh seafood. Others describe them as skeletal wrecks with bloated limbs and sunken eyes. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle, though right now you're definitely leaning more towards the skeletal wreck territory. And the irony is, despite all this misery, pirates actually had it slightly better than the Navy sailors. Royal Navy ships rationed even more tightly, and their punishments were much harsher. On a pirate ship, you might starve, but at least you can complain about it without getting whipped. Not that it really helps. Tonight, you lie awake in the dark, your stomach doing gymnastics, trying to recall what a pear tastes like. Was it sweet? Was it juicy? Did it even exist, or are you just imagining it? Someone nearby farts in their sleep. Another one groans. You think about rats. You try very hard not to think about rats. And once again, you whisper into the dark, "Please don't sink." At first, you thought the worst part of this floating nightmare was going to be the food. Or maybe it was the constant threat of being killed by a cannonball. But no, you were wrong. So deeply, horribly wrong. Because now your gums are bleeding, your breath smells like an open grave, and the entire left side of your jaw is pulsing like it's trying to drum out Morse code for kill me. You've got a toothache. And out here, that is basically a death sentence that's wearing a smile. There are no dentists on a pirate ship. There are no sterile tools, no reclining chairs with those cheerful little bibs. What you do have is a guy named Gristle, who once helped yank a molar out of someone's skull during a storm using nothing but a rusted hook and a bottle of rum. He's now considered to be the ship's surgeon. Congratulations, you're in his care. He doesn't even bother to ask what's wrong. He just squints at your face, mutters something about the rot's deep, and starts warming up a pair of iron tongs over a candle. You try to run. He grabs you by the collar and shoves you down onto a barrel to sit. You're given a stick to bite down on and a small slug of rum, which does absolutely nothing except make you feel like you want to puke and panic at the exact same time. The crew gathers around to watch like it's some kind of puppet show. You scream before the tongs even touch you. Gristle is not a gentle man. He yanks, he twists, then he yells, "Hold him," when you start to flail. There's a crunch, a pop, and then a pain so white-hot it feels like a bolt of lightning just got lodged inside your skull. Tooth problems were absurdly common at sea. All that hardtack and no real hygiene meant that pirates' mouths were rotting disasters. Cavities would fester, gums would swell, and infections would spread. There are journals from that time describing black mouths and jaw worms, which sound completely made up, but sadly they aren't. The standard solution was to just yank it out and hope for the best. Anesthesia, if you could even call it that, was usually just rum and a lot of pressure applied to your chest so you didn't flail around too hard. Occasionally, people would die from the shock or the blood loss. You're lucky you only passed out for a little bit and woke up with one less tooth and the taste of iron in your throat. But that's just the appetizer. The real horror comes a few days later when the fever sets in. You're shaking uncontrollably, soaked in your own sweat, and your jaw has ballooned into a grotesque lump. The infection didn't leave, it just went deeper. Now it's creeping its way toward your brain, whispering sweet nothings of death and delirium. Someone says it might be blood poisoning. Someone else says you're cursed. No one offers you an actual cure. You just lie there in your hammock, your mouth swollen, drooling and muttering to yourself. And honestly, you're kind of impressed you've even made it this far. If it's not the teeth that get you, it'll be the limbs. You see, pirate life is physically brutal. Every single day you're pulling on ropes, climbing the rigging, lifting heavy barrels, and swinging onto the decks during raids. All of that action means injuries. And out here, injuries can turn ugly very fast. A twisted ankle, well, good luck walking on that. A splinter in the wrong place could fester into an abscess the size of a crab. And then there's the big one, amputation. Lose a finger or a hand, and you're still considered one of the lucky ones. Lose a leg, and now you've got a nickname and a permanent limp, assuming you even live through the sawing. You get your first amputation show about 2 weeks later. A cannon misfires during a practice drill, and it blasts a guy's arm into what looks like spaghetti. He doesn't scream at first. He just stares at the dangling mass of bone and flesh like it personally betrayed him. Then the pain hits. Gristle is called for again. This time he brings out his kit, which is just a roll of bloody cloth, a saw that smells like rot, and a jug of really, really strong rum. The patient is strapped down. There's no debate. If the arm stays, he dies. If it goes, he might live. That's the entire decision-making process. No second opinions. The crew gathers around again. You don't want to watch, but somehow you can't look away. The saw goes through the muscle with a wet, crunching sound, and the screaming is so raw it actually echoes through your spine. When it's finally over, Gristle throws the limb overboard and just wipes his hands on his pants. The man survives, but just barely. He wakes up sobbing and then he starts laughing. You're not sure which one is worse. Historically, surgery at sea was a grim, grim affair. Pirate surgeons, when they even existed, were often just failed doctors or shipwrights who knew how to saw through wood and figured, how different can a leg be? They used hot tar to cauterize the wounds, and they'd sew you up with thread that had probably been used to mend sails the day before. Sterilization. Never heard of her. If you didn't die from the procedure itself, you still had to survive the infection, the fever, and the fact that you were living in a floating germ tank with rats chewing on your bandages at night. There's an open debate among historians about just how many pirates actually underwent amputations and survived. Some argue that the survival rates were surprisingly high, given the rugged nature of pirate medicine. Others insist that any success stories were just exaggerated over time to help build the pirate mythology. Either way, if you go under Gristle's blade, you're not betting on science. You're betting on sheer, dumb luck. And luck, well, she's not always kind. And you've seen the guy with the wooden peg leg. He walks with a thunk and a grimace, and he claims he used to be the fastest sailor on the sea. Now he spends most of his days polishing his leg with whale oil and telling anyone who'll listen how he once kicked a man off a plank. With his good leg, mind you. He's one of the few who actually laughs about it. The others, they stay quiet, like the sea took more from them than just their flesh. You start brushing your teeth with a bit of rag and some rum just in case. You pray you never get a splinter. You avoid Gristle like he's a ghost. You check your limbs every single morning like you're taking inventory. Everything's still attached. Good. You've made it through another day. Tonight, as the ship groans and the sea slaps against the hull like an angry dog, you lie awake again, staring into the dark, listening to someone 3 hammocks over cough like they're dying. And you think to yourself, this can't possibly get any worse. You're wrong, of course. You thought pirates were just lawless, wild, unhinged brutes, and okay, some of them absolutely are. But here's the twist. Pirate ships have rules, lots of them. More than you would ever expect from a bunch of guys who probably can't spell the word authority without stabbing someone halfway through. They call it the code. And you had better learn it fast, because ignorance is not an excuse when the punishment involves whips or knives or a nice, lonely island where you can die of exposure and regret. The code isn't written down on some fine piece of parchment. It's not even nailed to the mast. It lives in memory and in teeth-clenched whispers, passed down from one sailor to the next like ghost stories with blood at the margins. The first time you hear it, it's from the quartermaster, a scarred man with a voice like gravel and a nose that's clearly seen too many arguments. He calls you and a few of the other new recruits to the deck, and he runs through the basics like a school teacher who has already accepted your inevitable failure. Rule 1, equal shares. That's not exactly what you expected from a group of self-serving criminals, but pirates hate unfair captains even more than they hate the Navy. When they take a prize, gold, food, weapons, whatever it is, it gets divided up according to rank. But even the lowest deckhand gets something. No more of that you get paid in glory nonsense like back on the merchant ships. Out here, everyone wants their cut, and God help you if you ever try to cheat. Rule 2, keep your gear in check. That includes your weapons, your clothes, and anything else the crew depends on. Lose your pistol during a raid. That's 10 lashes. Let your powder get wet. That's 20. Forget to clean your musket. You might just get tossed overboard to think about what you've done. The crew doesn't tolerate mistakes because mistakes out here cost lives and loot. Rule 3. Fight fair, at least among yourselves. Disputes are settled by duel or by vote, depending on how much blood anyone is willing to spill. Some arguments get resolved with fists at dawn. Others involve knives, a circle of chanting drunk men, and someone walking away with fewer fingers than they started with. The important thing is that once it's done, it's done. Carrying a grudge for longer than a few days is considered suspicious, and suspicious people get watched. Watched people tend to get eliminated. The code goes on. Lights out at sunset, unless it's a special occasion. No gambling during a storm, no smuggling your own personal treasure aboard, and definitely, absolutely no sneaking into someone else's hammock, for romantic reasons or otherwise. That last one is especially enforced, and the crew seems unusually passionate about it. You suspect someone had a very bad experience involving a love triangle and a cannon fuse. Now here's the weird part. These rules, they kind of make sense. Pirate crews couldn't rely on the actual law, so they just made up their own. And unlike most naval officers, captains on pirate ships could be voted out. If the crew lost their confidence in him, they'd hold a vote and just pick someone new. Usually, it was the guy who looked the scariest with his shirt off. It's rough, but it's also weirdly democratic. Historically, this system wasn't just some fantasy. Real pirate codes, like those of Bartholomew Black Bart Roberts, were shockingly detailed. They covered everything from conduct and loot division to punishment, and even what kind of music could be played on board. Some codes banned gambling entirely. Others required everyone to keep their cutlasses sharp at all times. The whole idea was to maintain order, not out of any sense of morality, but out of sheer survival. An undisciplined crew was a dead one. But here's where it gets dicey. The enforcement of the code, that's all up to the mood of the ship. One day, someone drops a dagger and just gets a warning. The next, someone forgets to clean a cannon and they end up lashed to the mast with their back looking like shredded sailcloth. Justice out here is more like a storm. Random, loud, and full of things flying through the air. One guy, a young kid, maybe 17, gets caught pocketing a silver spoon after a raid. A single spoon. The captain doesn't even blink. He orders the boy to be tied up and whipped 12 times in front of the whole crew. The kid doesn't cry. He just grits his teeth and takes it, blood running down his back like spilled wine. Afterward, he's untied and given a piece of cloth to bite on. "Don't do it again," someone says, as if that's going to help. You don't sleep very well that night. Punishments could vary wildly. Lashes were common. Flogging would leave scars that never fade, and sometimes it even killed. But there were worse fates. Marooning, a kind of pirate exile, was a favorite for traitors or major screw-ups. You get dropped off on a deserted island with a pistol and a single shot. Not enough to survive, just enough to make your own ending, if starvation, the sun, and madness don't do it for you first. And then there's keel hauling. You'd heard of it in drunken rumors, but you figured it couldn't possibly be real. It is. A rope is tied around your chest and your feet. You're thrown into the water and then dragged under the ship's hull. The barnacles rip your skin. The water fills your lungs. If you come up at all, it's as a screaming, shredded version of your former self. If you don't, well, you become one with the sea. Luckily, it's rare. Even pirates think it's a bit much. Some historians debate whether these punishments were really as frequent as the legends say. Keel hauling, for instance, might have been more of a naval thing than a pirate tradition, and marooning, while it was well documented, may have happened less often than the stories suggest. What is certain is that pirate crews enforced their codes fiercely, partly for control and partly out of paranoia. Trust was everything, and once it cracked, The consequences were brutal. One of the more fringe details you learn is about articles tattoos. Some pirates actually had parts of the code inked right onto their bodies, especially the rules about shares and fairness. It wasn't just for show. If someone died in battle, their tattooed rules could help settle any disputes over the loot, or at least give someone something to read while they were looting the corpse. You don't have any tattoos yet, but you're starting to think that maybe one wouldn't hurt. Just something small. Maybe don't steal spoons. Oddly enough, the longer you live under the code, the more it starts to warp your sense of justice. You start seeing things less as right or wrong and more as smart or stupid. Morality gets blurry. Survival, on the other hand, sharpens up like a knife. You do whatever it takes to keep breathing, and you hope your name never gets called when punishment time rolls around. Tonight you hear whispers about a man who is planning to jump ship. Not during a raid, just in the middle of the night when he thinks no one is watching. He's sick of the code, he's sick of the food, he's sick of the noise. You don't know if he'll actually do it, but you lie awake anyway, wondering what would happen if he does. Would they chase him down? Would they shoot him as he swam away? Or worse, would they just let him go and pretend he never existed? Either way, you're starting to realize that out here, freedom is just another word for following very specific rules or dying horribly. And tomorrow, there will be more rules to learn and more people failing to follow them. You wake up to the sound of screaming, but it's not panicked, not terrified. More like two drunks laughing about whose turn it is to shovel filth out of the bilge. It's still dark, probably just before dawn, and the air below deck is thick with the smell of sweat, old grog, and the unmistakable sour tang of unwashed bodies. You roll over and nearly tumble straight into a puddle of what you really hope is just spilled rum. Another day in paradise. There is no privacy on a pirate ship. None whatsoever. Everyone sleeps, eats, pukes, and argues in the exact same cramped space. The smell is biblical. It clings to your clothes, your skin, your hair. You wash in salt water whenever you get the chance, but that doesn't do much beyond moving the filth around in new and creative patterns. There's a reason pirates don't wear white. They'd look like moldy cheese after about a week. And your crewmates, oh, they're a real delight. A full cast of misfits and sociopaths, each one more disturbing than the last. There's Ratface Pete, who keeps dead seagulls in a crate for good luck. There's Whispering Jack, who talks to his belt like it's a person. And then there's Old Broady, who once pulled out his own tooth with a hook and now keeps it on a string around his neck like it's some kind of trophy. You avoid them whenever you can, but there's really nowhere to hide on this floating coffin. Eventually, someone will corner you and start rambling on about sea monsters, or how the moon is secretly plotting against them. These aren't the pirates you see in the movies. They don't sing sea shanties with perfect harmonies. They whine, they bicker, they cough up blood, and they argue over dice games that were just made up on the spot. Many of them are criminals who were too awful even for life on land. Murderers, deserters, and drunks who got kicked off of other ships. And now they're your coworkers. Your very armed, very unstable coworkers. One night you hear a thud in the dark. It's a fight over a missing knife. Someone ends up with a broken nose. The next morning, it's like nothing ever happened, except the blood is still on the floor, and one guy is now missing half of his eyebrow. Conflict is constant. Fights break out over stolen rations, cheating at cards, or someone just snoring too loudly. You learn to sleep with your boots on and your knife tucked under your hammock. Not that it would really help much. Historically, pirate crews were a mixed bag of humanity's worst impulses. You would get ex-Navy men, escaped slaves, failed farmers, and thieves from just about every continent. Ships like Blackbeard's Queen Anne's Revenge were said to be a floating Tower of Babel, with up to a dozen nationalities all crammed into one rotting hull. Communication was mostly just shouting and gestures, with a bit of shared profanity thrown in for good measure. If someone didn't like you, they didn't bother with gossip. They just made sure you slipped on the wet deck during the next storm. Yet somehow, despite all of this madness, the crew functions. They sail the ship. They prepare for raids. They haul supplies, they load the cannons, and they keep the ship moving forward. It's not order, it's pure survival instinct. Everyone knows that if the crew collapses, the ship sinks. So all the rage and the chaos get channeled into a strange sort of rhythm. You grow used to the screaming, the sudden bursts of violence, and the silent, grim camaraderie that always follows. You may not like each other, but you all want to stay alive, even if it's just barely. Here's something extra weird. Some pirates actually preferred life at sea because of all this chaos. They liked that nobody asked about your past, that you could be a nobody one day and the guy leading a raid the next. If you were tough, ruthless, and loud, you earned respect, regardless of where you came from. There were even cases of black and indigenous pirates being treated as equals, at least more equally than they would have been in any land-based society at the time. Not out of kindness, mind you, but out of practicality. Everyone pulls on a rope the same way when you're all trying not to die. Still, there's a fringe belief among some of the sailors that the ship itself chooses who stays, that it eats the weak and it keeps the wicked. A man who can't hold his liquor, who pukes at the sight of blood, who cries during storms. He's not long for this world. The sea wants hard men, or at least ones who can fake it well enough. And some nights, lying there in your damp hammock, listening to someone cough their lungs out across the room, you wonder which one you are. One day you get paired up with someone on deck duty, a guy called Elias. He's quiet and probably too smart for this kind of life. He shows you how to tie a proper bowline knot and how to judge the wind shifts just by watching the sails flutter. He smells like old salt and a series of bad choices, but he doesn't talk to his shoes or carry around seagull bones, so you latch on. It's the closest thing to a friendship you found out here. Elias tells you stories about a ship that went mad and just sailed in circles until the entire crew starved, about a ghostly vessel that sails only in the moonlight and sinks anything that it touches. You don't know if he's lying or just trying to scare you, but his voice is calm and low, and you don't mind listening. He tells you that the only way to survive out here is to be useful and to be invisible. Not too good, not too lazy, just there. A face that no one will remember when the knives come out. That night you dream of being thrown overboard. Not during a storm, just casually, like someone taking out the trash. You wake up drenched in sweat and you can't tell if the moisture came from the sea air or from your own panic. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about how much internal violence actually occurred on pirate ships. Some argue that all the chaos is overblown, that crews had to function after all. Others believe the tension was constant and explosive, only managed through the looming threat of violent reprisal. What's certain is that these weren't merry bands of freedom-loving rogues. They were volatile, desperate, and tightly wound. The kind of men who would stab you for looking at their hammock for too long. You've started counting the days, not because you think a rescue is coming, but because you want to know how long you've managed to last. It's become your own private badge of honor now. Another day survived in this floating cage of screaming, coughing, and threats muttered through broken teeth. You've gone from being hopeful to hardened, from a passenger to a prisoner to something else entirely. And somewhere deep in your bones, a question starts to form. You whisper it at night when you're sure no one else can hear. Am I one of them now? You barely sleep anymore. Not because the ship is loud, though it is, or because your hammock smells like a goat died in it, though it does. It's the night watch. Everyone's got to take a turn, and your turn seems to come up more often than you'd like. You learn pretty quickly that night on a pirate ship isn't peaceful or quiet. It's teeth gritting, nerve grinding, eyes straining in the dark paranoia. It's just you and a flickering lantern, surrounded by the kind of inky blackness that makes you start to doubt your own shape. You're posted up near the aft deck with a musket that might actually fire if you beg it to. The lantern beside you swings with the rhythm of the waves, casting warped, dancing shadows all across the rigging. The ship creaks and groans, a symphony of wood protesting its own existence. And then there's the sea itself, lapping, slapping, whispering against the hull. Sometimes it sounds like laughter. Other times it sounds like something is breathing. You try not to think about that. Your job is simple. Look for other ships and scream if you see one. That's it. Of course, you don't actually want to see anything because if you do, it usually means trouble. A Navy cutter, a rival pirate ship, maybe a merchant vessel if you're lucky. And even that means cannon fire and blood and chaos. Still, watching nothing but darkness feels like its own kind of madness after a few hours. You stare so hard into the dark that you actually start seeing things. Lights that aren't really there. Shapes that vanish the moment you blink. One night, you're sure you see a sail, a ghostly flicker on the very edge of the horizon. You call it out, your heart hammering in your chest. The captain comes to look, but there's nothing there. You get mocked for it for the next 2 days. Sleep deprivation is just part of the job. You doze in awkward little bursts between shifts, waking up unsure of what century it is. One day just bleeds into the next, each one as gray and salt-streaked as the last. You start forgetting things, simple words, names, where you put your belt. Your muscles ache constantly. Your eyelids twitch. You catch yourself talking to the mast like it's an old friend. You're not the only one either. There's a guy named Henley who whispers to the sea at night, begging it to take him kindly. Another guy just stares at his own hands, flexing them over and over like he's not even sure they're real anymore. Historically, pirate ships ran 24 hours a day, and the crew was always split into watches. The night watch was grueling, not just for the physical strain, but for the psychological toll it took. The dark was filled with threats, both real and imagined. Storms, reefs, surprise attacks, even supernatural fears. Pirates, like many seamen of that era, were deeply superstitious. Bad omens could be anything from a red sunrise to a bird landing on the mast. You learn all of these superstitions fast. You have to. The crew believes in them like they're gospel, and breaking one is a fast way to get yourself hated, or worse. Case in point, one night a bird lands on the bowsprit. A black seabird slick with rain. It just sits there staring. No one wants to touch it. Bad luck, says Whisper, who never speaks except apparently to say that. The captain orders it to be shot. The bird explodes into a puff of feathers and blood, and for a moment everyone on board relaxes. That is until the storm hits. A freak squall with lashing rain, howling wind, and sails snapping like whips. You spend 6 hours soaked to the bone, frozen, clinging to ropes that could yank you into the abyss at any moment. No one says it out loud, but you're all thinking the same thing. The bird cursed us. You don't even question it anymore. Sleep deprivation takes its toll in some strange ways. One night you hallucinate. You see your childhood home as clear as day, just floating there off the starboard side. You can smell fresh bread. You can hear your mother calling your name, and you reach out for it and almost step right off the ship. Someone yanks you back just in time. No one says anything about it. Hallucinations aren't rare out here. They're just not something that gets talked about. A few of the older pirates will admit that they've seen mermaids. Not the pretty kind, though. These ones have bloated, dead faces and nails like fish hooks. One of them swears he kissed one once. He has no lips now. You don't ask for the details. There's a debate among historians about just how frequent hallucinations really were among pirates and sailors. Some accounts describe vivid, shared visions. Others dismiss them as just exaggerations from sailors who were desperate to make their stories more exciting. But given the combination of bad nutrition, lack of sleep, constant fear, and potent rum, it's a wonder that more pirates didn't completely lose their minds. Out here, reality gets slippery. And when you're all alone with nothing but the sea and the stars, your brain starts to fill in the blanks with whatever nightmares it can dig up. You start to understand why pirates believe in monsters, because something about the sea really does feel alive. It moves underneath you, it whispers all around you, it punishes you without any warning. You stare into it long enough and it starts to stare back. Elias tells you about the sea eyes, a feeling that the ocean itself is watching you. Sometimes, he says, it looks up at you and it decides whether you're worth keeping. You laugh, but then you realize he's not joking. One night, you're paired up with Elias again. The two of you just sit there side by side, passing a bottle of grog back and forth and pretending not to be scared. He tells you about a time he saw a green light on the water, just a quick flash. And then the sailor who was standing next to him was just gone. No splash, no scream, just gone. Sometimes the sea takes one, he says, so it doesn't have to take all of us. You shiver, and it's not from the cold. You wish for sleep, but when it finally comes, it's not kind. You dream of sinking, of gasping for air, clawing, screaming, of your body tumbling down through the black water while things slither past your ears. You wake up gasping, your hands gripping the sides of your hammock like you're still drowning. Someone nearby farts. The spell breaks, but the terror lingers. The night watch becomes a part of you. Your eyes adjust to the darkness. Your hearing sharpens. You can tell who's sneaking grog from 10 feet away. You can tell when the weather's about to shift just by the tone of the creaking wood. You become, in a strange way, a creature of the night. Always alert, never truly rested, half real and half ghost. One of the more fringe facts you pick up is that some pirates believe their souls were tied to the stars, that if they died at sea, their spirit would rise up and become part of the night sky. It's a comforting idea, in a bleak, haunted sort of way. You start to look at the stars differently, not just as points of light, but maybe as people who just had enough. Maybe someday you'll be up there too, just a tiny pinprick of light over a cold, endless sea. But for now, you're still here, still watching, still blinking into the blackness, and praying that you see nothing at all. Morning hits you like a slap in the face. You're only halfway through a restless nap when someone yells, "All hands," and the deck becomes a stampede. You swing out of your hammock, groggy and sour, your boots hitting the boards before your eyes are even fully open. The sky is dark, thick with heavy clouds, and the wind has that sharp kind of edge, like it's looking for someone to shove off a ledge. But that someone, of course, is probably going to be you. It starts slowly, a low groan from the rigging, the sails snapping a little too hard. The ocean, which is already never calm, takes on a new kind of rhythm, one that churns rather than rolls. The bow of the ship rises a little too high, then drops down a little too fast. Somewhere deep in the ship, the timbers creak like they're complaining to the gods. That's when the rain begins. Not gentle droplets. No, this is like a vertical river, falling in sheets so dense you can't see 5 feet in front of your face. And with the rain comes the real enemy, the storm. You're yelled at to help secure the sails. That means climbing. That means clinging to ropes that are slick with rain and salt while the ship bucks underneath you like a furious animal. The wind howls in your ears. Your hands start to bleed from the rough lines, and your boots slide against every single rung of the rigging. The sea throws spray across the deck like it's trying to scrub the entire crew away. Every wave that slams into the hull shudders through the whole ship, making it groan in its bones. You lose all track of time. It could be 10 minutes or 2 hours. All you know is water and shouting and pure terror. Lightning cracks across the sky, closer than you've ever seen it before. And for just a second, the entire ship glows in a harsh white light. You can see every single one of your crewmates in full silhouette, soaked, desperate, clinging on for dear life. Then the darkness returns, even worse than before. The thunder follows, deep and ragged like a monster breathing. And through it all, you just hang on. Your fingers are numb, your eyes are stinging, and you're praying not even to survive, just to not fall yet. Storms at sea are the true crucible. Forget about cannonballs and curses. This is the thing that really tests whether you were built for this life. Historically, many pirate ships were lost not to battle, but to storms. A bad squall could splinter masts, rip sails to shreds, and roll a ship over like it was made of paper. The golden age of piracy wasn't just about cutlasses and treasure maps. It was about hurricane seasons and rogue waves. The Caribbean, especially, was notorious for sudden, violent tempests that could sink vessels without any warning. One of the guys near you slips. His scream is brief. He hits the deck hard, rolling, his limbs bent in ways they shouldn't be. You think he's dead, but someone drags him below deck, shouting for the surgeon. You don't see him again that day. You don't ask what happened. The storm gets worse. The captain is barking orders that you can barely even hear. The quartermaster ties himself to the wheel. You see Elias shouting something, pointing. Then he vanishes behind a curtain of water. For a moment, the deck is just you and the rain and the thunder. Then another wave hits and you almost fly backward. A rope lashes against your arm and it saves your life. You cling to it like it's a lifeline because it is. The water's rising now. The deck is flooding with every single wave. Below deck, it's even worse. Dark, crowded, and half submerged. Barrels are floating around like bobbing coffins. The bilge is overflowing. Men are scrambling to pump water out, but it's a losing battle. Someone starts throwing cargo overboard, trying to lighten the load. You toss 2 crates yourself, not even checking to see what's inside. Could be gold, could be biscuits, it doesn't matter. It's just dead weight now. Eventually, the storm begins to pull away slowly, like a beast that's losing interest in its meal. The rain eases up. The wind slackens. The waves settle down from being monstrous to merely miserable. The sky is still dark, but it's no longer trying to tear you in half. You collapse onto the deck, coughing up salt water, soaked to the bone and shaking with exhaustion. You survived. You don't know how, but you did, for now. But the damage is everywhere. The sails are torn, 2 of the masts are cracked, 1 crewman is dead and another is missing. That last one missing is whispered like a curse, not because they think he survived. No, out here missing means he was taken by the sea. And if you believe in that sort of thing, and you're starting to, you don't speak his name for fear that the ocean might hear you and come for you next. One of the more fringe beliefs among pirates was that storms weren't just weather. They were punishment for betrayal, for cowardice, for mocking the sea. Some even claimed they could feel when a storm was coming based on the mood of the ship or the mood of the water. You're not sure what to believe anymore, but it's hard to dismiss the feeling that the ocean has a mind of its own, a cruel, calculating one. Some historians say that pirates were especially vulnerable to storms because their ships were often lighter and faster, built for speed, not for sturdiness. Others argue that pirates were skilled navigators and storm dodgers, masters of reading the wind and the waves. But either way, even the best ship couldn't always win against nature's wrath. Storms didn't discriminate. Rich, poor, pirate, navy, they took whoever they wanted. After the chaos comes the work. Hours and hours of repairs, climbing back up the rigging to patch sails, securing cracked beams, hauling drenched supplies back into storage. No one rests. Not really. You all move like ghosts, drenched and grim, your eyes hollow. The man who died is wrapped in a piece of canvas and weighted down with stones. There's no ceremony, just a nod, a lift, and a splash. The sea gets what it wants again. You finally get to sleep that night, if you can even call it that. It's more like just collapsing into unconsciousness, your body too drained to even dream. You wake up hours later with your fingers still curled into tight fists, your nails digging into your palms like you were still gripping the side of the ship even in your sleep. And here's the kicker. No one thanks you. No one praises you for surviving, for climbing, for hauling, for not dying, because everyone else did the exact same thing, or they didn't. This is just another part of the job, another nightmare you don't get a medal for. Out here, surviving a storm doesn't make you special. It just means you're still useful. So you stagger back to your duties with the rest of the half-drowned, half-broken crew. You eat something bland and terrible. You scrub the deck because there's always blood and grime to be cleaned. You refill the water casks. You try not to look at the empty hammocks. And as the wind picks up again and the horizon starts to ripple in that particular way, you catch yourself whispering a new kind of prayer. Not today. Not again, please. Not again. You don't really notice it at first. Your nose adjusts so fast you almost forget what clean air ever even felt like. But then the ship docks near a port just briefly and someone opens a cask of actual oranges, and suddenly your whole body remembers what normal smells like. The sharp citrus stabs you in the face like a long-lost memory, and that's when it finally hits you. You stink. Everyone stinks. The ship itself stinks. Everything on this floating hunk of death stinks in a way that feels absolutely permanent. It's not just the sweat, or the mildew, or the fact that no one has bathed in weeks, except maybe during the rainstorms when they all strip off their shirts and laugh like madmen. It's something deeper than that. The ship smells like 1,000 sins all baking together in the sun. Rancid fat, unwashed bodies, rotting food, stale grog, dried blood, and something sweetly sour that you can't quite identify and you definitely don't want to. Every single surface is sticky. Every piece of fabric is greasy. You touch a rope, and your hand comes away smelling like salt and dead dreams. Below deck, the air is completely unbreathable. You have to duck your head, stoop down like you're walking into a crypt, and squeeze between the hammocks that are swaying like slabs of meat in a butcher's shop. It's hot even when it's cold outside, and it's damp even when it's dry. You learn not to breathe through your nose. That's a rookie mistake. You breathe through your mouth, shallowly and carefully. And you just pretend that you're not inhaling 50 other people's exhalations. People try to help themselves, but just barely. Some of them chew on cloves if they can manage to steal them. Others wipe their armpits with rags that have been soaked in vinegar, which honestly just smells worse than the sweat. There's one guy, bless him, who found a crushed flower petal on a short sleeve, and he now tucks it behind his ear like he's some kind of a perfume merchant. He still smells like a corpse that's been marinated in rum. But hey, you've got to give him points for effort. You've stopped noticing your own stench. That's the worst part. You can't tell if your socks smell like mildew or just sadness. You sleep in the same clothes you worked in, bled in, and threw up in. You can't even be sure what color your shirt used to be. Yellow, white. It's just gray now, stained with everything the sea has to offer. Your boots are permanently damp. You don't even want to think about what might be growing inside of them. One day, the ship passes close to another vessel, and you actually hear someone on the other deck start to gag. "By God, what is that?" they yell, covering their face with a kerchief. Your crew just laughs. It's like a badge of honor to them. You start to feel like your skin has become a part of the ship. That maybe the stench isn't just on you anymore. It's in you. Like the ship has infected you cell by cell. Historically, ships were hygiene disasters. Fresh water was limited, soap was a rare luxury, and sanitation as we know it didn't exist. Pirates sometimes did a little better than Navy sailors, if only because they spent more time ashore and were less bound by strict routines. But that didn't stop the spread of lice, fleas, and all kinds of diseases. Your body is a war zone now. You itch constantly. You've scratched your leg raw more than once. One guy actually found a worm in his sock. Not a leech, a worm. You pray that it never happens to you. You haven't properly defecated in private since your very first day on board. The toilet, if you can even call it that, is just a plank that's been extended off the back of the ship with a rope to hold onto. You have to crawl out there, praying that the ship doesn't jolt, your pants around your ankles, the wind howling around you, and the sea beneath you looking like a giant waiting mouth. It's terrifying. One wrong move and you're food for the sharks. Sometimes you just hold it for days to avoid making the trip. That, of course, leads to its own set of horrors. Constipation, gut pain, and gas that makes everyone around you threaten to murder you. One of your crewmates, Jari, brags that he once spent 5 minutes on the plank in the middle of a hurricane. Says it was a spiritual experience. You suspect he's just got brain damage. And the smell isn't just bad, it's also dangerous. Infections fester in damp wounds. Mold grows in clothes that never seem to dry. The rats thrive below deck, feeding on crumbs and anything else that's soft. Someone swears they saw a rat crawl into a hammock and start to nibble on a sleeping man's ear. He apparently woke up and tried to chew the rat back. You can't verify that story, but nothing would really surprise you at this point. Here's a fringe fact for you. There are recorded tailies of ships that were so rank that some ports actually refused them entry. In the Caribbean, certain port authorities would demand bribes just to let pirate vessels dock. This was partly because of their notorious reputations, and partly because of their absolutely unbearable stench. You always thought that was just an exaggeration. Now you know better. You wouldn't let yourself into port if you were in charge. There's a scholarly debate over whether pirates had better hygiene than the average Navy crew. Some argue that they did. Less formality meant more frequent dips in the ocean and more access to fresh water from stolen supplies. Others say that's just wishful thinking, that life at sea was disgusting, period. And pirates were certainly not exempt. They just might have had a little more fun while they were rotting alive. And here's the grossest part. Sometimes the smell actually saves your life. You can sniff out an infection before it really hits hard. You learn to recognize the rank musk of a fevered sweat, the metallic tang of blood from a fresh wound, the sour milk reek of pus. You know when someone's dying by the way the air seems to thicken around them. Your nose becomes a survival tool. It's horrifying, yes, but it's also useful. You find yourself fantasizing about just a simple bar of soap, maybe two. You imagine scrubbing your scalp until your fingernails come away clean. You imagine stepping into a bath so hot that your skin turns red, and then coming out smelling like something other than despair. One day, a crewmate finds a bar of soap that was hidden in a crate from a recent raid. He holds it up like it's a relic from some lost civilization. Then, in full view of the entire crew, he eats it. Thought it was cheese, he says. No one even flinches. Tonight, as the wind shifts and the smell of bilge and sweat wafts through the narrow passage where you sleep, you lie there with your arm over your face, trying not to breathe too deeply. Someone farts 2 hammocks over. Someone else coughs a thick, phlegmy cough. The guy next to you mumbles in his sleep, "Please don't rot yet," over and over again. And you think to yourself, I would trade all the gold in the Caribbean for a clean shirt, dry boots, and just 15 minutes in a bath. You know you'll get none of those things, but still, you hope. You'd think the worst part of pirate combat would be the fear, the panic, the yelling, the chaos. And yeah, all of that is bad. But what really gets to you is the confusion. You imagine sword fights being elegant and cool, with graceful moves, witty quips, maybe a flashy spin or two. Nope, not out here. Combat aboard a pirate ship is a screaming, filthy pile of limbs, smoke, blood, and a series of very bad decisions. It's fast, it's loud, and it smells like burned powder and wet intestines. It always starts the same way. A ship is spotted on the horizon. There's a tense moment while the whole crew squints at the sails and tries to guess if it's a merchant ship or a military one. If it's a merchant, you might just live. If it's the Navy, well, you'd better sharpen your blade and kiss your lucky charm goodbye. The captain calls for silence. Everyone crouches down, hides, and waits. You slip behind a barrel, your heart hammering against your ribs, your palms slick with sweat. The order comes. Raise the black. The Jolly Roger goes up, snapping in the wind. Sometimes that's enough. A lot of merchant captains will just drop their sails and surrender right then and there. It's better than having to face a horde of sea-drenched lunatics with pistols and wild eyes. But when they don't surrender, the cannons start. The noise is indescribable. You feel it deep in your bones more than you actually hear it. A deep, concussive boom that shakes the entire world. The recoil nearly knocks the gun crews right off their feet. The deck trembles underneath you. The smell of sulfur is thick in the air. Splinters rain down like angry wooden wasps. You duck instinctively, even though you're not entirely sure what you're ducking from. Cannons aren't accurate. They're not meant to be. They're meant to smash, to terrify, to punch holes in the hull, or to scatter the enemy crew. You hear a screech from the other ship as one of your shots lands, followed by a lot of shouting. Your ship returns fire. You watch a cannonball miss completely and land in the ocean with a loud slap. The gunners swear like poets. You just try not to throw up. Then comes the boarding. Grappling hooks fly through the air. Ropes are swung across. Pistols are fired more out of habit than any real accuracy. You follow the rest of the crew across the makeshift gangplanks. Or worse, you just jump. You land badly, you roll, and you scramble up just in time to parry a wild swing from a man who looks just as terrified as you feel. It's not a duel, it's a brawl. There's no rhythm to it. No honor, just pure desperation. You stab at anything that's moving that isn't dressed like you are. You get punched, you get bitten. Someone slams the butt of a musket into your ribs. You hear a scream nearby, a really high-pitched one. A boy, you don't look, you don't want to know. Pistols are mostly useless after the first shot. They're one and done unless you've somehow got time to reload, which you don't. You've seen guys wield them like clubs, just beating their enemies with the barrel. And swords. Forget the sleek cutlasses from the stories. These blades are rusted, chipped, and bent. One guy is swinging a meat cleaver. Another one is using an axe that still has bits of rope stuck in the handle. You fight with whatever it is that keeps you upright. At one point, you slip in something, definitely not water, and you fall onto the deck. A man lunges at you. You roll out of the way. Your blade finds his gut. He gasps. You don't look back. You can't. If you stop to think, you stop to die. Historically, naval combat during the golden age of piracy was brutal and short. Most battles lasted less than an hour. The ships didn't want to destroy their prize. After all, what's the point of sinking something you're trying to loot? But the fighting itself was savage, hand to hand. The noise, the smoke, the claustrophobia. It broke men's minds just as often as it broke their bones. Pirates relied on fear just as much as they relied on firepower. The black flag wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. There's one moment that's burned into your brain. You're ducking behind a mast when you see the enemy captain. He's older, with gray hair slick with sweat, his eyes wild. He points a pistol at your crew's quartermaster and he fires. He misses. Your quartermaster returns the favor. He does not miss. The man goes down, a neat little hole where his forehead used to be. There's no drama, he just collapses. You don't even hear the thud over the din of the battle. Eventually, the fighting starts to slow down. One side breaks. This time you win. The enemy surrenders. Some of them drop their weapons. Some of them start to weep. Some just sit there, stunned, surrounded by bodies and blood and ruined crates. Your crew lets out a cheer, but it's half-hearted. There are too many bruises, too much mess. Victory doesn't taste like glory. It tastes like copper and vomit and smoke. And now comes the worst part, the looting. You help carry the crates of sugar and rum and maybe some gold if you're lucky. More often, it's spices or tobacco or cloth. The injured are dragged aside. The dead are tossed unceremoniously into the sea. There's no time for mourning. There's no energy for it. You find yourself stepping over the corpses without even blinking. There's a crew vote on what to do with the prisoners. Sometimes they're offered a choice: join us or be set adrift. Sometimes they're just left there. You don't ask questions anymore. You just do your job. Here's a quirky historical detail for you. Pirates often tried to avoid full-blown combat if they could. It was expensive and it was risky. Many of them just relied on sheer intimidation. The flag, the rumors, the reputation. Blackbeard himself would tie lit fuses into his beard just to look like a demon rising up from the sea. But when intimidation failed, things got ugly fast. You've now seen firsthand what ugly really means. There's still a debate among historians about how common combat actually was. Some argue that it was rare, that most pirate ships won their prizes without ever having to fire a shot. Others believe it happened often, especially when they were facing stubborn captains or there was some kind of miscommunication. Either way, you now know that a single battle can change everything. People disappear, ships limp away, broken, and even if you live, you're never quite the same person again. That night you just sit on the deck, your shirt stained with blood, your hands shaking. Elias sits beside you, a long gash running down his arm. Neither of you speak. You just stare out at the sea. It looks so calm now, like it wasn't just a battlefield a few hours ago, like it hasn't been swallowing up men and ships for centuries without so much as blinking. You can still smell the powder. You can still hear the ringing in your ears. You touch the hilt of your sword and you realize your hands won't stop trembling. You survived your first real fight. You don't feel heroic. You just feel hollow. The smell of powder hasn't even faded when you're summoned to the main deck the next morning. Your arms still ache from all the looting. Your ribs feel bruised from where someone rammed into you with a musket butt. And your stomach is still churning with leftover fear. But none of that really matters. There's another ship on the horizon. The spyglass confirms it. The sails are wide, the hull is deep, and it's likely loaded with cargo. You're not even fully done cleaning the blood from your last raid. And now the crew is already preparing for another one. This is the rhythm of pirate life, feast or famine. Either you're just floating through empty waters, eating moldy biscuits and playing dice for buttons, or you're chasing down ships like a pack of rabid wolves, hoping that they're full of sugar or coin or at least something that's edible. The new target is bigger than the last one, which could mean one of two things: more treasure or a worse death. The crew starts working the sails. There's a tension in the air. It's not fear, not quite. It's more like a hunger, the kind that lives deep in your belly and in your bones, just gnawing at you. Pirates don't raid for fun, not really. They do it because it's how they eat, it's how they stay afloat, it's how they avoid becoming the ones who are being plundered. You're caught up in it now. You've stopped thinking of yourself as a hostage. Somewhere along the line, you became a part of the hunt. This new ship sees you early on. The Jolly Roger goes up, but they don't stop. Instead, they start turning, trying to run. That's the worst-case scenario. Chasing a ship means time, and it means risk. They might get away, or they might be leading you into a trap. Either way, the crew doesn't hesitate. The sails are tightened, the wind is gauged, and the orders are barked out. Your ship surges forward with a series of groans and snaps, like it knows this dance all too well. The chase lasts for hours, the sun blazing down, sweat pouring off of you. Every single crew member pulling on ropes, adjusting angles, navigating every single gust of wind like it's a matter of life or death, which fun fact it is. You lean over the rail at one point, just watching the sea whip past in streaks of white and blue. That's when you hear it, the distant boom of cannon fire. They're not waiting for you to board this time. They want to scare you off. You don't scare that easily anymore. Your ship returns fire, but the range is poor. The cannonballs just splash into the water, sending up geysers of salt and noise. Eventually, you get close enough to the enemy to see the whites of their eyes, panic-wide and darting. It's another merchant vessel, poorly armed, desperate, and this time they're going to fight. The boarding is less chaos and more of a bloodbath. They know that they're cornered. You know that they've got cargo that's worth protecting. You lose count of the bodies, the screams, the brutal clang of iron on iron. You're shoved, you're slashed, you're nearly thrown right off the deck. You retaliate with the same ugly, primal instinct that saved you last time. And when it's all over, you're alive again. Panting, numb, your hands sticky with someone else's blood. The cargo hold of the merchant ship smells better than anything you've experienced in weeks. Spices, molasses, even a whole barrel of lemons. Honest to God, lemons. The crew lets out a massive cheer. It's not gold, but it's survival. It's enough to buy you another few weeks of not starving, of not having a mutiny. Your quartermaster smiles, showing you what's left of his teeth, and he mutters something about it being a good haul, finally. You're too exhausted to even smile back. Here's where it gets complicated. After a battle like this, the loot has to be divided. The shares are all calculated. The code is followed. The captain gets a double portion. So does the quartermaster. The specialists, like the gunner, the carpenter, and the surgeon, they all get slightly more than the regular deck hands. And you get your first official cut. It's not much. Just a few coins, a flask of rum, half a tin of cinnamon, but it's yours. And you realize that for the very first time, you've actually earned something. Not through labor, not through some kind of accident, but through violence. Historically, the promise of shares was one of piracy's most attractive perks. Unlike on Navy ships, where you might work for years without getting any pay, pirates would split the spoils right after every single successful raid. It was risky, sure, but for many, especially the poor, the desperate, or the enslaved, it offered a taste of control. Even if that control came with a saber and the constant threat of death. You learn in the days that follow that the spoils of a raid are only part of the reward. There's also status. If you survive enough fights, people will start to nod when you pass by. They'll stop calling you new meat. They'll invite you to sit with them in the shade instead of making you swab the deck twice. Elias claps you on the shoulder and he calls you a proper dog of the sea. You don't correct him. But the flip side of success is complacency. The ship grows fat with all the loot. The crew grows loud with drink. Fights start to break out over stupid things. Whose hammock is whose? Who stole whose dried figs? You spot one man threatening another over a spoon. A single spoon. The energy on the ship shifts from being grateful to being greedy. And you start to hear whispers, not about your enemies, but about each other. You catch wind of a plot, maybe it's not serious, but it's loud enough to reach the captain's ears. A group of men thinking they deserve a larger cut, that the captain is holding back. You don't get involved, but you start sleeping with your blade a little bit closer. Because the worst fights on a pirate ship don't happen between enemies. They happen between brothers. This is the rotten core of piracy. It's not just the fear of the Navy or the fear of drowning. It's the knowledge that even in victory, you're never truly safe. You sail with killers, and trust is always conditional. If the gold runs low, if the food starts to spoil, if the next ship manages to escape, you might just be the next one with a blade between your ribs. And yet you don't leave. Not that you could, but even if you could just jump ship right now, you wouldn't. You're in too deep. You've tasted what it means to win something with your own two hands, even if those hands are now stained. You've seen the faces of the men who once called you useless now nod at you with respect. You've held treasure in your hands, and you've felt that strange, hot satisfaction in your chest that says, "I earned this." You don't know what that says about you. Here's an eerie fringe fact for you. Some pirates used to keep mementos from their raids, but not the loot. Something weirder, a splinter from a sunken ship, a gold tooth that was pulled from an enemy. One guy supposedly carried around a cork from a rum cask that cracked during his first boarding, and he called it his lucky plug. You find yourself looking at the hilt of your own sword, wondering if this is now your memento. If this stained, chipped blade means something now. If you mean something now. That night there's a feast of sorts. The spices from the raid are all dumped into a massive pot of stew. Someone starts to play a battered fiddle. The crew drinks and laughs and howls. You just sit on a barrel staring at your tin of cinnamon, debating whether you should trade it for a dry pair of socks. You don't. You clutch it like it's a medal. You survived another raid. You made a little bit of profit. You didn't get stabbed. You even got to eat something that didn't taste like barnacles. You should be proud, but all you really feel is tired. You wake to the sound of shouting, but it's not the usual kind. There's no drunken brawl, no barking orders from the captain, no gaggle of grog-soaked idiots arguing over dice. This shouting is sharper, colder, with low, urgent tones being passed around the deck like some kind of poison. You pull yourself up from your hammock, your bones still sore from the last raid, and you catch the one word that always means trouble: mutiny. It's whispered at first, then it gets louder, more confident. You hear it from Brody, who usually just talks to his belt buckle. You hear it from Ratface Pete, who hasn't bathed in living memory. Even Elias gives you a look, tight-lipped and tired, that says something is definitely happening. You already know the rule. When people start going hungry, or they think the loot is being unevenly split, the knives come out. Not for the enemy, but for each other. The current captain, a man named Boone who is built like a tank and has a voice like thunder, has led a dozen successful raids. But that doesn't matter now. The word is that he skimmed a little off the top of the last haul, kept a few coins tucked away for himself. Maybe he took a barrel of rum that nobody noticed. The thing is, he should have known that someone would notice. Pirates don't forgive thievery, especially not from their own. The quartermaster, Grim Harrow, isn't helping matters. He's supposed to be the balance, the voice of the crew, the guy who keeps the captain honest. But lately, he's been less of a voice and more of a whisper. The rumor says he's in on the theft, or worse, that he's planning a betrayal of his own. Whether or not it's true doesn't even matter. Once that seed is planted, it spreads. And on a pirate ship, trust is worth less than a pair of dry socks. Historically, mutinies weren't rare in pirate life. You might think that pirates were all about chaos and anarchy, but in truth, Their ships ran on a very delicate, violent form of democracy. If the captain lost the confidence of his crew, he could be voted out or just thrown overboard. Sometimes they would just maroon him on the nearest spit of sand with a bottle of rum and a single bullet. Other times they just let the sea decide. Boone might be next. You don't want to pick a side. Not because you're noble, you're just tired. But staying neutral on a ship where everyone is armed is like trying to swim with sharks and hoping that they'll respect your personal boundaries. So you listen, you watch. You fake interest in every single conversation. You'll nod when someone complains about the captain, but you don't actually agree. You'll laugh when someone jokes about accidental drownings, but not too hard. You keep your hands clean, or at least clean enough. One night, you're summoned to a quiet meeting below deck. A group of 10, maybe 15 men are all gathered near the powder room. Elias is there. So is Whispering Jack, who is sharpening a blade while smiling down at the floor. A man named Crimp is doing most of the talking. He says the captain has lost his edge. He says it's time for new blood. He says the next ship you take could be all yours if you just back the right crew. You stay quiet. Crimp looks at you, waiting. You nod. You lie. It's safer that way. The air on the ship changes after that. The next day, everyone moves a little bit faster and they grip their blades a little bit tighter. The captain barks an order and no one jumps to follow it. His eyes narrow. He knows. They always know. You wonder if he'll strike first. History is full of captains who got wind of a mutiny and cracked down on it early and hard. Blood on the deck, public beatings, executions without a trial. Sometimes it worked and sometimes it just pushed the crew to snap even faster. But Boone, he does something unexpected. He calls a meeting. The entire crew gathers on the deck. The sun is high, the air thick with tension and sweat. Boone steps up to the helm. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't threaten anyone. He just speaks. He reminds the crew of all their victories, of the treasure that's in the hold, of the Navy ships you've managed to outrun. He admits his mistakes. Too much rum was taken. Maybe a few coins did go missing. He swears it wasn't out of greed, just poor judgment. He says you'll all vote on it with no punishments and no blood. It's so calm, so unpirate-like, that no one really knows what to do. You vote, a scrap of cloth is tossed into a barrel, black for keeping Boone, red for replacing him. You choose black not because you like him, but because you hate Crimp more. When the votes are all counted, Boone wins, but just barely. Grim Harrow smirks like he already knew what the outcome would be. Crimp, he says nothing. He just nods and walks away. But the next morning, Crimp is gone. He's disappeared. There's no note, no witnesses, no splash in the night. He's just gone. Some say he jumped. Others say that Boone had him disappear. Elias doesn't say anything. He just cleans his blade a little more thoroughly than usual that day. And so things return to normal, or, well, as normal as they get. But now every smile feels sharp. Every laugh has an edge to it. The crew is quieter now, more watchful. The code still stands, but you've seen its limits. Democracy works out here, but only until someone gets nervous or ambitious or just bored. And you're learning fast that survival isn't about strength or speed. It's about knowing when to speak up and when to just vanish. There's an old superstition among pirates that you hear whispered now and then. Don't sleep near the ladder. It means you don't want to be the first one to be grabbed if someone needs a scapegoat in the middle of the night. You move your hammock the next evening, just in case. There's a scholarly debate over just how often pirate captains were actually deposed. Some claim that it was rare, that most captains were too feared or too respected to be challenged. Others point to accounts like those of Charles Vane, who was ousted by his own men for being too reckless, or Edward England, who was voted out for being too kind. The truth likely depends on the mood of the crew, the size of the loot, and which way the wind was blowing on a given Tuesday. As for you, you survived the mutiny that wasn't, but it leaves a mark. You've seen the cracks in the ship's foundation. You've heard the hunger behind the friendly voices. You know now that the scariest enemy isn't the Navy or a storm. It's the man who stands right beside you, smiling, while he counts how many steps it would take to throw you overboard. There's a saying on the ship now, half joke, half threat. You ain't a real pirate till your teeth fall out. You hear it the first time when someone spits a mouthful of blood into a barrel, his gums looking like chewed up velvet. The man grins, or well, he grimaces, and someone nearby mutters, "Ah, the scurvy's got him." Everyone laughs, but it's that brittle, tight kind of laugh that people use when they're trying not to imagine the exact same thing happening to them. You've stopped laughing at anything that's related to disease. Scurvy doesn't come on like a thunderclap. It creeps up on you. First, you start to bruise easily, then your joints begin to ache. Then your gums swell up and your breath could drop a man at 5 paces. When your teeth start to wiggle, really wiggle, it's like your whole face is trying to fall off. You can't eat right. You can't sleep without biting your own tongue. You mumble when you speak because everything inside your mouth feels like it's about to melt. You've seen men try to tie their loose teeth back in with a piece of string. You've seen men pull them out with their own bare fingers. You do not want to join that club. The worst part is, you know exactly why this is happening. Everyone does. You haven't seen a piece of fruit since the lemon barrel ran out 2 raids ago. That tiny burst of citrus was like heaven, pure, acidic salvation. But it was gone within a week, and now you're back to sucking on salt and crunching on biscuit beetles. The cook tried to pass off some moldy onions as a cure, but one guy almost choked to death when it squirted in his mouth like a rotted jellyfish. That was the last time anyone ever trusted the onion cure. Historically, scurvy was the bane of long voyages, especially in the age before vitamin C even had a name. Pirates knew the signs, the swollen gums, the weakness, the bleeding from places that shouldn't be bleeding. But they didn't always know what the cure was. Some of them guessed right with citrus fruits or pickled vegetables. Others just hoped that they'd be able to raid a port before their bodies completely gave out. You're just hoping that someone finds a single blessed lime in a barrel of fish hooks. And then there's the smallpox, or maybe it's just the pox. Nobody is really sure. One guy starts showing spots, then another, then another. Red bumps, high fevers, shaking fits that make them gnash their teeth so hard that their teeth snap off. They get isolated down below deck, behind a row of barrels near the cargo hold. Someone sets up a ragged old curtain, as if that's somehow going to fool the pox. The air down there starts to stink in a way that even you haven't smelled before. And you've smelled things that would make a vulture cry. One by one, the sick men stop moving. They just get quiet. No more screaming, no more twitching, just still. Then after a few hours or maybe a day, their bodies are lifted up in silence and slid off the plank with a single splash. No prayers, no coins over their eyes, just water. It hits you suddenly that there is no such thing as dying peacefully on a pirate ship. Every death is either loud and awful, or it's quiet and suspicious. You can't get sick without someone eyeing you like you're contagious, like you might be the next reason they all die. And if you are sick, you'd better hide it. A cough gets you a side eye. A nosebleed gets you whispers. A bad fever, that's a rope around your ankle and a splash before nightfall. One night you wake up drenched in sweat. Your skin is burning hot, your legs are aching, and your stomach is tight like someone has wound it up with a winch. You panic. Are you sick? Is it the pox? Is it the scurvy? Is it something worse? You stumble up to the deck, you gasp in the night air, and you retch over the side of the ship. A shadow passes behind you. No one says anything. That silence is even worse than yelling. You don't know if you're being watched or if you're being measured. You start chewing on whatever you can find. A piece of dried seaweed, a bitter bit of root that someone insists is medicinal. Even the white, tasteless pulp from the bottom of an old barrel. Anything to keep your teeth inside your head. You've started dreaming about oranges. Not treasure, not gold, just a stupid, fat, juicy orange. You want to bite into it and just let the juice run down your chin. You want the acid to sting your gums. You would trade your hammock for just one slice. Hell, you'd trade your sword for one. And then one day, by some kind of miracle, the captain announces that you're stopping at a hidden cove to resupply. Not a port, that's too risky, but a place that's known for its fruit trees and its fresh water. The crew cheers like a bunch of children. You have never seen grown men cry over a pineapple before. You see it now. As you approach the shore, the smell is the first thing that hits you. Green. That leafy, humid scent of plants that haven't been rotted or salted yet. The crew practically sprints onto the land. You're one of the first ones off. You literally run into the trees, you part the ferns until you find a scraggly-looking bush with something vaguely round growing on it. You tear one of them off. It might be a lime. It might be a moldy potato. You don't care. You bite right into it and you weep. Actual, honest weeping. The juice burns your gums and it tastes like a miracle. You pick a dozen more and you shove them into your shirt. Others are doing the same thing, hooting like madmen, drunk on vitamin C and the feeling of freedom. Of course, not everyone is so lucky. By the time the ship leaves the cove, 2 more men have been buried, one from a fever and one from a cut that turned black. The sea gives and the sea takes, but you're alive. Your teeth are still in your mouth. Barely. Here's a curious fringe fact for you. Some pirates believed that the pox was a curse that was passed on by sirens, sea spirits who were punishing men for plundering their sacred waters. It sounds ridiculous until you see someone who is covered in sores, babbling nonsense, and you swear that you can hear something whispering in the waves. You shake it off, but that night you sleep with your back to the hull, your ears covered. There's still a debate among historians about how often pirates suffered from disease compared to other sailors. Some argue that they had better access to the shore, so they were generally healthier. Others claim that the lack of routine medical care and their wild lifestyles made things much worse. Either way, one thing is for sure. A pirate ship was a floating petri dish. You might survive the Navy, you might survive battle, you might survive the storms, and you could still be taken down by a single rotten tooth. And so every single morning now, you check your gums. You run your tongue along your teeth and you count them like they're treasure. You watch the spots on your skin. You sniff the air, always listening for the telltale rattle of someone who is too sick to hide it anymore. You tell yourself that you're okay that you're lucky that you've got time, but you don't ever say it out loud. You don't want the sea to hear you. You always thought the Jolly Roger meant fun. A black flag, a skull and crossbones, maybe a little yo-ho-ho, and a parrot squawking for comic relief, something right out of a storybook. But now, standing at the base of the mast, watching that ragged flag snap in the wind like a dare, you realize the truth. The Jolly Roger is not a joke. It's not a costume or some kind of fashion statement. It's a threat, a warning, and a confession all rolled into one. It says, we are monsters and we're proud of it. The day starts out clear, the sky a perfect dome of blue. You're up in the rigging, trimming a sail, thinking that maybe, just maybe, you'll get through 24 hours without any vomit or fire or death. Then the lookout calls it out. Sails on the horizon. You expect the usual scramble, the whooping, the rush to prepare, but something is different this time. The captain doesn't order you to hide. He doesn't tell you to hold your fire or to sneak up on them quietly. He just grins and says, run up the flag. You do it. You haul on the rope and the Jolly Roger unfurls. It's not the one you're used to either, not the cartoony-looking skull. This one has a skeleton that's holding an hourglass in one hand and a spear in the other, and it's standing over a bleeding heart. It's terrifying. Even the paint on it is uneven, like someone carved it with their own fingernails in a fit of pure rage. And you realize that this is a specific message. This one says, surrender now or die screaming. That's the whole point of pirate flags. Every symbol has a meaning. Some of them signal that there will be mercy. Others promise torture. Historical pirates used dozens of different flags. Hourglasses meant your time was running out. Spears meant we like violence. A bleeding heart meant we enjoy watching you suffer. And the black background, that meant you might get to live if you surrender. A red flag, though, that meant no survivors. This flag is black, but there's a red smear across the skeleton's face that might just be old blood. The merchant ship you're pursuing sees it. You can tell by how they immediately start turning, how their sails catch more wind. They're running. Your captain loves that. He says it makes the chase all the sweeter. The crew cheers like they're at some kind of sporting event, not like they're about to commit felony murder out at sea. You just stand back, clutching onto the rigging, trying your best not to look seasick or scared or both. And here's the nasty little twist. The flag isn't just for them. It's also for you. It's a reminder, a contract. When you sail under that thing, you agree to what it stands for. You become the monster. You're no longer someone who was just forced on board. You're not a victim anymore. You're a part of the message. That realization shakes you more than the chase itself. When your ship finally closes the distance, the captain has the flag lowered halfway. You think it's a mistake at first until Elias tells you that it's all part of the show. Half-mast means we're in mourning, he says. Usually for you. Sure enough, the merchant ship starts to slow down. You see people waving a white cloth. They're surrendering. No one on your ship cheers. Not yet. You board their ship with the others. The crew of the merchant vessel is all lined up, shaking, their eyes wide with fear. Some of them have weapons, but they drop them quickly. There's no fight left in them. They've seen the flag. They know what it means. And still, just to make a point, the captain selects one man from their crew and has him dragged forward. We fly death, he says, so we have to mean it. The man is stabbed. Slowly and deliberately. He's not killed, not yet. It's just enough to show everyone else what's waiting for them if they don't behave. Blood splashes onto the deck. A few people start to weep. A child clings to her mother. You don't breathe. You don't move. You don't speak. Then and only then does the captain let the looting begin. Later, you ask Elias why the show, why the flag, why the need to terrify them. Fear, he says, is faster than gunpowder. If they're scared enough, they don't fight. No fighting means no blood, no damage to the ship. A clean job, clean loot. He pauses. And sometimes we just like the fear. You wonder if he means we or they. You hope it's they. Here's a quirky fact you won't find in any children's books. Pirate flags were often customized on the fly. Some were sewn together from old sails. Others were painted with tar or pig's blood or even red wine. There's one story about a pirate who actually nailed his enemy's ears to his flag and then hoisted it up, just to see if it would flap right. Nobody remembers his name, but everyone remembers that flag. Some ships even carried multiple banners to swap out, depending on what their mood was. There's some scholarly disagreement over how widely used the Jolly Roger really was. The image of the skull and crossbones is so iconic that it feels universal. But some historians argue that most pirate ships either used plain red or black flags, or no flag at all until the very last second. The Jolly Roger, in all of its stylized glory, might be more myth than it is fact. It doesn't really matter to you now. You saw one today, and it changed things. The merchant ship is stripped completely clean. Crates of cloth, tobacco, a few chests of silver. One of the passengers, a girl with red hair and a sword at her side, is invited to join the crew. She politely declines. The captain smiles and says he likes her fire. She's allowed to leave, and you don't ask what would have happened if she had said yes. You return to your ship. The flag is still up, tattered now, the wind chewing at its corners. You just stare at it as the sun goes down, thinking about what it's become. It's not a banner, it's a confession, a dare, a mask that you wear for so long you start to forget your real face. That night, someone paints a new symbol on one of the sails, a crude skull with burning eyes. You ask who did it. No one answers. No one has to. It's just the ship announcing what it is now and what you are too. You lie in your hammock, your eyes wide open, the image of that flag burned into your mind. You wonder what would have happened if the merchant crew had decided to fight back. You wonder what kind of a person you've become that you didn't do anything to stop the stabbing. You wonder if the Jolly Roger is flying inside your own chest now, waving silently behind your ribs, because here's the truth. The flag is more than just fabric. It's a line, and you're on the wrong side of it now. There's a sound that always makes your stomach twist, no matter how long you've been at sea. It's not the sound of cannon fire, not even the crushing sound of splintering wood. It's quieter than that. It's the creak of a rope being pulled tight. The kind of rope that loops around a person's wrists or their ankles or a man's throat. It's the prelude to punishment. You hear it now, echoing through the stillness of the afternoon, and the hairs on the back of your neck rise up like sails in a squall. Someone has broken the code again. This time it's simple, theft. One of the newer members of the crew, barely more than a boy, was caught trying to sneak a silver ring into his boot. It wasn't even a valuable one, just a little band from the last raid, probably worthless. But the captain had made the rules perfectly clear. The loot gets divided up fairly. Anyone who is caught skimming, that's considered mutiny in miniature. And mutiny, even in its mildest form, gets met with pain. They tie him to the mast. He doesn't struggle. Maybe he knows that struggling would just make it worse. Maybe he's just too scared to move. His shirt is torn off, his back is pale and trembling. The bosun steps forward with the whip, an old, knotted thing with bits of shell and wire woven into the strands. It's not meant for correction. It's meant to cause damage. You've never actually heard a whip break the air before. It whistles first, like a snake hissing through the dark, and then it cracks with a sound like bones snapping. The boy screams. The crew doesn't even blink. Another lash, more blood. By the third one, he's sobbing. By the fifth one, he's quiet, just breathing raggedly, his eyes wide and distant, his mouth moving like he's either praying or cursing or both. You turn away. Not because you're noble, but because if you watch for too long, someone might think that you're enjoying it, and that's even worse. On a pirate ship, too much sympathy is seen as weakness. Too much interest is seen as sadism. The safest thing to do is to detach yourself. So you walk over to the rail and you just stare out at the sea, pretending that the salt wind is stinging your eyes. Pirates were brutal, but they weren't lawless. They had their systems. Punishment wasn't chaos, it was a ritual. Whipping, maroonings, beatings, even executions, they all followed an unspoken code. You broke the rules, you paid the price, and it didn't matter if you were new or if you were a seasoned veteran. The punishment was often public, a lesson for everyone else, not just to scare them, but to remind them. A pirate crew couldn't afford to have any freeloaders or liars. One loose thread, and the whole ship would just unravel. There's talk sometimes of a man named Holtz. No one knows if he's real or not, but he supposedly tried to poison the captain for a bigger share of the loot. They say he was tied to the bowsprit, spread-eagled like a scarecrow, and just left there through a storm, lashed by the rain and the wind until his skin started to peel off like burnt parchment. When he finally died, they cut him down, not for a burial, but to toss him to the sharks. Elias says that part of the story is true. He claims he actually saw the sharks waiting under the hull. Some punishments are more creative. There was a guy who once drank too much grog, pissed in the water barrel, and got caught. He didn't get flogged. He got the silent treatment. No one spoke to him for 3 whole days. No one handed him any food or water. No one even acknowledged his existence. On the 4th day, he cracked. He stood up on the rail and he started yelling nonsense. The captain called for him to come back down. He refused, and then he jumped. The sea took him quietly. There's a fringe tale you hear one night during a game of dice, half whispered between curses. A ship out of Nassau once punished thieves by sewing them up into a piece of sailcloth and then dragging them behind the boat. Not for long, just enough to scrape the skin off. They called it the ghost's toe. Supposedly, if you survived, they would let you stay on the crew. You had to live with your skin half gone, but you got to live. That was the reward. Some historians argue that these kinds of punishments weren't as common as the legends make them sound. They claim that pirate crews relied more on social pressure, voting, and practical consequences like docking a man's shares or demoting him. But those are historians who are sitting at their desks, dry and safe. You've seen what happens when someone breaks the code out here. The lash is real. The bruises don't lie. Fear is a much faster teacher than fairness. After the flogging is over, the boy is cut down. He collapses onto the deck, twitching. Someone hands him a dirty rag to bite on. No one helps him up. He has to crawl below deck on his own. Whether he stays or he jumps ship at the next port, no one knows. What matters is that everyone saw what happens when the rules get bent. The crew moves on. Lunch is served. Someone starts humming a sea shanty like the mast wasn't just dripping with blood 5 minutes ago. You clean your blade that evening, even though it hasn't seen any use today. You do it because it's something to focus on, something mechanical, just one stroke, then another. Elias sits nearby, as quiet as ever, running his fingers over the grip of his pistol like it's some kind of a talisman. Neither of you speaks. You've learned by now that the worst wounds aren't always from a battle. Sometimes they come from within. Betrayals, whispers, quiet cruelty. There's no honor in watching someone bleed out over a ring. There's no pride in tying a man to a mast, but there is survival. And in the pirate life, survival always wins. There's an eerie moment after nightfall. The ship is rocking gently, the moonlight slipping across the deck like spilled milk. You pass by the mast and you swear you can still see the imprint of the boy's body there, shadowed in the wood like the ship itself remembers. Maybe it does. After all, she's seen more punishment than most prisons. And here's the part that keeps you up at night. You didn't stop it. You didn't speak up. And a part of you knows that the next time it could be you. Maybe not for theft, but for failing in a raid, for getting caught sneaking extra water, for stepping on the wrong person's toes. Because out here, punishment isn't about justice. It's about control. And the whip doesn't care who's guilty, only who's next. Shore leave isn't a reward. Not really. It's more like a collective pressure release, the kind that lets everyone just explode at once before they start stabbing each other back on the ship. You hear the word port, and the crew cheers like a bunch of children who have just been promised candy in the middle of a fist fight. The ship changes its course, and suddenly everyone starts preening, brushing the knots from their beards, trying to bleach the sweat stains out of their shirts, and swapping out their boots that are full of seawater for ones that only smell mostly like dead fish. You can't help it. You're excited, too. You haven't walked on stable ground in weeks. Your knees have forgotten how to function without constantly swaying. And the idea of land, real land, with smells that aren't mold and bilge, with food that doesn't crunch when it's not supposed to, that's enough to make you overlook the fact that half the crew is planning to drink until they completely forget their own names. The port in question is a crooked little place that's clinging to the edge of an unnamed island. It's all thatched roofs and bent palm trees, and it has a harbor that looks like it was dug out by a drunk god. There's one dock, half a dozen shanty bars, and a brothel that's leaning so hard to the left it looks like it's trying to escape from itself. You dock in the mid-morning. By mid-afternoon, the crew has scattered into the town like a bunch of rats onto a loaf of bread. The first punch gets thrown before you even make it all the way down the gangplank. Two men are fighting over who gets to disembark first. One of them ends up in the water, laughing and bleeding from the nose. Everyone cheers. You just step around them and you follow Elias, who is already halfway down the dock, moving with the calm purpose of a man who knows exactly where he buried his last stash of emergency rum. Port days always follow a certain pattern: drink, fight, gamble, and regret. Not always in that particular order. You make it to a tavern that's called the Drunken Gull, where the floor is mostly just sand and the roof is leaking grog from the second story. Inside, it's complete chaos. Tankards are slamming, dice are clattering. A man in the corner is playing a hurdy-gurdy with such an intensity that you suspect he's trying to exorcise his demons. You get handed a drink that smells like it was strained through a cannonball. You drink it anyway. By your second cup, things start to get a little bit hazy. By your third, you've arm wrestled a man who is twice your size and you've won purely by sneezing mid-match and distracting him. By your fourth, you've lost your boot in a dice game. Not the pair, just the left one. You don't even remember taking it off. Historically, pirate ports were just melting pots of debauchery. Nassau, Port Royal, Tortuga, names that were whispered with equal parts dread and delight. They were places where pirate ships could resupply, unload all of their stolen goods, and more importantly, just let their crews go completely wild. The tavern owners welcomed them for their gold. The locals tolerated them for the chaos. And the pirates, they came for everything that the sea denied them: food, flesh, and forgetfulness. You stumble outside at around dusk. The air smells like fire, sweat, and sweet tobacco. Somewhere nearby, someone is being serenaded very badly. A man runs past you with no pants on. Another man is walking calmly behind him, holding the pants up like they're some kind of a trophy. You turn and you see Elias sitting on a barrel, feeding crumbs to a chicken that he insists is named Morris. You don't question it. You're too drunk to even spell the word chicken. The brothel is easy to find. You just have to follow the trail of broken glass and laughter. You don't go inside, but plenty of the others do. You can hear the creaking walls from the street, the moaning, the occasional scream. It's not all pleasure, though. Pirates often confuse lust with ownership, and not all of the encounters are consensual. That part never makes it into the sea shanties. You feel a little bit sick, and not just from all the rum. Here's a bizarre little fact you overhear from a drunken sailor. There's a port where they train parrots to mimic the sound of coins clinking in a purse, just to lure pirates into the gambling halls. Another sailor claims there's a house that lets you pay in teeth. Both of the men have black eyes. You don't doubt either of their stories. Later, you're just sitting in the sand outside of a shuttered bakery, cradling your head. The stars are all blurry. Your stomach is a mutiny all of its own. You hear a familiar whistle and you look up to see one of your crewmates being chased by a mob of people. He's laughing. They're not. You decide not to get involved. It's a lesson that you've learned well. If it's not your blood, it's not your problem. As the night stretches on, the streets start to get quieter. There are fewer shouts and more groans. You pass by a man who is asleep with a chicken on his chest and 2 gold coins balanced on his eyes. He's not dead, just hopeful. Someone is playing a sad tune on a fiddle, the notes rising up into the night like ghosts. You sit down beside a barrel and you finally throw up everything that you've eaten in the past 2 days. It feels like freedom. Scholars still debate whether shore leave was truly as wild as all the legends say. Some argue that the stories were exaggerated, just tall tales that were passed around to make pirates seem more fearsome or more fun. Others point to the official records from governors and merchants that describe drunken mobs, fires, and even full-blown riots. From where you're sitting, wiping your mouth with a sleeve that smells like fish and blood, it all feels pretty accurate. You wake up the next morning on the deck of the ship. You don't remember how you got there. Elias is sitting next to you, holding Morris in his lap. You bought him, he says, completely deadpan. Said you wanted a conversation partner. Morris squawks and then immediately poops on your leg. You just nod, accepting your fate. The crew trickles back throughout the day, limping, groaning, and bragging. One man is missing a finger. Another one has a new tattoo that says freedom in backward letters. The captain counts everyone's heads, he nods once and he says, "Set sail." No one asks where. No one questions the decision. Shore leave is over. The sea is calling. You haul on the lines with shaking hands and a pounding skull, knowing that you won't see land again for weeks, maybe even months. As the port fades away behind you, someone starts to sing. It's a slow song, not a cheerful one. It's a tune about death and salt and lost gold. The rest of the crew joins in. You hum along, even though your throat feels raw. Morris flaps his wings and he settles down on a barrel. You're back at sea. And somehow, despite all the bruises, and the hangover and the suspicious pain in your right knee, you already miss the land. Treasure, that's the word that got you here, right? Not freedom, not rebellion, not a life on your own terms. Treasure. Shiny gold coins, glimmering necklaces, crowns from fallen kings, all tucked away into velvet-lined chests. Every single tale you ever heard growing up just dangled that word in front of your face like it was bait on a hook. But now, after months aboard this cursed ship, after all the blood and the bruises, and chewing on your own sleeve to stop your teeth from chattering through the storms, you've realized a brutal truth. There is no treasure, not the kind you ever imagined anyway. You're in the hold right now, helping Elias sort through your latest haul, the big score. It's the sugar bark that you seized 3 days ago after a decent chase and a rather unimpressive fight. No one died, at least not on your side. And what did you risk your life for? Crates. Endless crates of sugar and molasses and cotton and tobacco. It's like a warehouse on water. You dig through one of the crates looking for coins. Instead, your fingers just sink into sacks of raw sugar that's so fine it clings to your sweat like flour. It's sweet, yes, but is it worth dying for? Definitely not. But the quartermaster is grinning. He's practically dancing among all the barrels because this, apparently, is real treasure. Sugar fetches a high price at the right port. Tobacco, too. And cloth, especially if it's still dry, can be flipped for more rum and gunpowder than a whole pile of coins ever could. You just stare at the sticky mess that's pooling in your boots and you wonder what the hell you're doing with your life. Elias claps you on the shoulder. "What, you wanted gold?" he asks. "This is gold, my friend. White gold. Sweet gold. Gold you can actually eat." You resist the urge to throw a whole sack of sugar at him. Historically, pirates rarely ever found the fabled chests of Spanish doubloons and cursed jewels that the stories like to go on and on about. Most of the time, their loot was much more practical. Barrels of food, tools, spices, medicine. Things that a pirate crew could actually use or sell off quickly before they rotted. Gold was rare, and when it was found, it was often in the form of trade bullion or coins that were just mixed in with all the other cargo. Once in a while, a ship would stumble upon something that was glittery enough to make the legends feel real. But those were the exceptions, not the rule. And even when you do find coins, there's a catch. The moment they're in your hands, every single man on board becomes a little bit twitchier, a little more watchful, a little more willing to slit a throat over a bad dice roll. Silver brings out sharp tempers. Gold brings out murder. You've seen it happen twice already. Once over a gold necklace that actually turned out to be brass, and once over a coin that vanished in the night and later turned up in someone's boot. The wrong boot. But sugar. No one ever fights over sugar. No one gets stabbed over dried figs or indigo powder. That's part of the appeal, you guess. Safer cargo, less stabbing, more boredom. And yet the crew still talks about buried treasure like it's a real thing. There's always some guy with a whisper. I heard of a cache out in the Keys, sealed up in iron. Black Sam Bellamy's hoard, stashed away in a cave that's only visible at low tide. A wreck near Tortuga, sunk with 30 chests of coin and one full of bones. You don't know if they really believe it, or if the story is just too good to let die. One man, Weevil, who smells like he was born inside of a boot, swears that he found a map once. He sold it for a bottle of rum and a kiss from a toothless brothel girl. He claims it led to a cave that was full of golden idols and goblets as tall as a man's thigh. You ask him why he sold it then. He just grins and he says, "Maps are cursed. It's better to be poor and alive than rich and haunted." That's another thing that you've noticed. The richer the loot, the darker the stories that come with it. Everyone has heard of treasure that comes with a cost. Chests that scream when they're opened. Gold that melts when you touch it. Ships that sank because their cargo wanted to stay buried. You just chalk it all up to too much rum and too many concussions. But a part of you, some salty, sleep-deprived part, starts to wonder. There's a debate among historians, too, about whether pirates actually buried their treasure. The popular image of X marks the spot, and skeletons guarding hoards comes mostly from books, not from reality. Only a few documented cases actually exist, like the infamous Captain Kidd, who may or may not have buried a stash of treasure on Gardiner's Island. Most pirates just spent their loot as fast as they got it, on booze and women and bribes and repairs. There was no point in saving up for the future, when tomorrow you might be floating in the sea with half of your face gone. Still, one of the gunners carries around a scrap of oilskin with some shaky writing on it and half of a drawing. He says his father gave it to him. He says it leads to the treasure, the one that everyone dreams about. No one believes him, but no one laughs at him either. You help haul the cargo up onto the deck, where it's all stacked and cataloged. A few of the sacks burst open, covering the boards in a sweet white dust. One of the pirates snorts a line of it as a joke, and he immediately starts to choke. The crew laughs so hard that someone actually falls overboard. No one jumps in to help him. That night, as the sun sinks and the barrels are all tied down, you just sit by the rail with Elias, and you listen to the others sing about gold and women with ruby eyes. You think about how none of them ever seem to sing about tobacco or nutmeg. No one ever composes a sea shanty about dried oranges. And yet, here you are, sailing from death to death, all for sugar. You still dream about gold sometimes. Coins tumbling through your fingers, a chest so full that you can't even see the bottom. You always wake up with your hand closed tight, gripping nothing but splinters. Here's a strange little fact for you. Some pirates were actually paid in goods instead of coin. A barrel of molasses here, a bolt of silk there. They'd trade those items in port, just like merchants, hawking stolen tea for a new sword or an old map. That makes you laugh a little. Pirates playing shopkeeper. You guess everyone's got bills to pay. You glance out at the horizon, dark and wide and endless, and you think, maybe the real treasure is just surviving long enough to be able to spend anything at all. Or maybe the real treasure is just an orange that hasn't turned to mush, or a dry pair of boots. You pat your own boot and it squelches. Definitely not the boots. It starts with a woman's voice shouting over the wind. It's not a scream, not a shriek, just a barked command in a language you can't quite place. At first, you think it's your own captain shouting orders from somewhere behind you. But when you turn around, you see another ship, low and sleek. Its sails as dark as storm clouds, moving like it's being pulled by something angry and hungry beneath the waves. And standing there on the forecastle, her arms folded, her chin held high, is a woman. Not some tavern lass who was dragged along for good luck. No, this is the captain. The crew starts to mutter. Elia's whistles low. That's Anne Bonny's colors, he says, half in awe and half in fear. Or maybe it's Mary Reed's. Either way, we're in for it. You've heard the names before in whispers, stories of women who fought fiercer than any man, who dressed like devils and fought like demons. You had always assumed those stories were mostly myth. It turns out they're standing 30 feet away, armed to the teeth, and staring down your entire ship like they're trying to pick out which part of it they want to sink first. Your captain doesn't lower the Jolly Roger. That would be seen as weak. Instead, he calls for a parley. It's a rare thing and it's risky, but sometimes it's necessary when the other side looks like they know what they're doing, and worse, that they enjoy it. A rowboat is lowered down. You're chosen to row, of course, because who wouldn't want to row straight towards a ship that's being captained by a living legend? You keep your head low as you cross the water. Up close, their ship is different from yours. It's sleeker, it's better maintained, and it's a lot less vomit-stained for one thing. There's a strange sense of order to it. The ropes are clean, the deck is scrubbed, and the crew is mostly made up of women. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Some of them have swords that are longer than your own leg. One has a pair of pistols slung across her chest like they're a part of her ribs. You're ushered on board and you're brought before the captain. Her name isn't Anne or Mary. She tells you to call her Maud, just Maud. Her eyes are a bright green and they're colder than seawater on a winter morning. Her hat is huge, ridiculously huge. You wonder if she wears it just to keep the sky from falling on her. The parley is short and efficient. She wants a part of your last haul. She knows what you took. She knows where you took it from. She even knows how many barrels of molasses you brought on board. No one asks how. Spies, probably, or informants back in port. It doesn't really matter. She offers you a split. 50-50, or she'll just take all of it by force. Your captain wisely accepts. He knows a losing hand when he sees one. And from the twitch of Maud's fingers near her pistol, he knows that she would enjoy making him regret saying no. The deal is struck. No shots are fired. No blood is spilled. That's rarer than buried gold. Back on your own ship, the mood is mixed. Some of the men are angry about the split. Others are relieved. You, though, you're just fascinated. Because you had always assumed that this was a man's world, a brute's world, a place where women only existed as myths or as victims or as background noise. But that's not the full truth. You've just met one of the exceptions. And out here, the exceptions are the ones who make the rules. Historically, female pirates were rare, but they were very real. Anne Bonny and Mary Reed were the most infamous. Both of them were known for dressing as men in battle, wielding pistols, and reportedly fighting harder than anyone else on board. Qing Shi, a Chinese pirate queen, commanded a fleet of hundreds of ships, and she enforced a strict code that included instant execution for disobedience. These women weren't mascots. They were leaders, terror makers, rule breakers, and occasionally, survival stories that were dressed in lace and steel. There's a superstition among sailors that having women on ships brings bad luck, that they stir up storms and they drive men mad. You've heard that one plenty of times. You've also heard the older sailors claim that seeing a woman on board means the sea will soon take someone from the crew. But now you're starting to wonder if that's just old fear talking. Because Captain Maud didn't look like bad luck. She looked like order, like danger, like exactly the kind of person who survives out here. Where survival means knowing when to trade barrels of goods and when to slit throats. Not every pirate queen is famous, though. There are quiet ones. The cook's assistant on your own ship, a woman named Myra, is said to have slit a Navy officer's throat during a boarding party and then tossed his body into the sea with no one even noticing. She rarely speaks, but everyone makes sure to be polite to her when she's sharpening her knives. Then there are the oddballs. The musician with a third nipple who claims it's a lucky charm that he got from a mermaid. The old man who believes that his beard is haunted by the spirit of his dead wife. The carpenter who swears he once kissed Davy Jones and now he can't eat shellfish without crying. These people aren't captains, but they're a part of the fabric of pirate life. They're fringe characters, living legends. They keep things interesting and terrifying. One of them, Jasper the Mad, has a tattoo of a woman who is riding a shark on his back. He says it's either Ching Shi or his mother. He's not really sure. Either way, he talks to her every single morning before breakfast. You used to think he was just insane. Now you're not so sure. There's an open debate among historians about how much power women really had in pirate society. Some argue that they were just rare exceptions who were only tolerated because of their extraordinary skill or their force of personality. Others suggest that pirate life, being outside the bounds of traditional society, actually allowed for more freedom, and that included gender. A floating meritocracy where the only thing that really mattered was what you could do with a blade and a bottle of rum. You ask Elias what he thinks about it all. He just shrugs. Doesn't matter, he says. Anyone who can sail, fight, and not get themselves killed is fine by me. I don't care if they've got a beard or a bonnet. You just nod because honestly, he's right. A week later, you spot Maud's ship again on the horizon. She doesn't come close this time, she just sails past, a black streak on the water. Her flag is flying high, an hourglass above two crossed blades. You wonder what kind of a message she's sending this time. A reminder, a warning, or maybe it's just a nod from one survivor to another. That night you dream of standing at a ship's wheel, the wind in your hair, a whole fleet behind you. In the dream, your voice is loud, your coat is long, and no one ever questions your orders. You wake up smiling just a little bit. Because out here, the sea doesn't care who you are, only whether or not you last. And Maud, she's still out there. You're eating cold fish off of a rusty tin plate when you notice something odd. It's quiet, but not in a calm way. Pirate ships are never calm. It's quiet in the way that a room goes silent right after someone says something they really shouldn't have. You glance up. Elias is gone. So is Whisper. The captain hasn't left his quarters in 2 whole days. And the quartermaster, he's been packing the deck like a priest at a hanging. The rest of the crew won't meet your eyes. Something is off. And out here, off usually means that someone is about to end up bleeding or on fire or both. You start to ask around carefully, just neutral questions. Seen Elias. Is the captain all right? You just get shrugs and non-answers, a few scowls. One man just spits overboard without even looking at you. Finally, you catch Brody up near the forecastle, nursing a cracked lip and a mug of what he insists is tea, but it definitely smells like old socks and rum. He leans in close, his voice low, and he says, "They're talking deals. Navy, maybe, or the East India bastards." Deals, that's even worse than mutiny. Pirates live outside of the law, that's the whole point. But every now and then, someone on board gets clever or desperate and they start talking to the other side. Maybe they offer up some intel in exchange for gold. Maybe they sell out their old allies to try and buy a pardon. Either way, it's treason. And treason doesn't go unnoticed for very long. It turns out that Whisper, who has been with the ship longer than you have, disappeared during the last port call. No one saw him leave. There was no note, no fight, he was just gone, but someone found a sealed envelope in his hammock. There was nothing written on the outside, but inside there was a list of names. Your name is on it, so is Elia's, so is Brody's. The implication is clear. Someone is keeping tabs, selling out the crew one name at a time. Your hands go cold. It could be nothing. It could be a joke. It could be a warning. Or it could mean that the next time you dock, there's going to be someone waiting there for you with shackles and a gallows that's already been built. The crew starts to fracture. People are talking in corners now. Arguments are bubbling up just beneath the surface. At night, the hammocks are quieter, but not because people are sleeping. They're listening, they're watching. You keep your blade closer than ever, and you make a habit of sleeping with one eye half open. Elias finally returns one morning with a split lip and no explanation. You ask him where he went. He just says, "Out." You don't press him on it, but later that day, he slips you a folded scrap of paper with a single line that's been written in charcoal. "Trust no one below deck." You ask no more questions after that. The captain finally emerges the next day, and he's looking older than you remember. His eyes are sunken, his jaw is set. He orders a course change away from the usual trade lanes. That's when you know that he's scared. Whatever Whisper was doing, whatever deal was struck, it's big enough to spook the man who once laughed while being shot at. The captain says nothing about the note, nothing about the list, but the sails are tight. The guns are cleaned, and no one, absolutely no one, leaves their post. Then you notice the ship that's following you. It's subtle at first, just a little dot on the horizon. A merchant vessel, maybe. Then it gets closer. It's never gaining on you, but it's never falling back either. It's just there. You sail to the left and it follows. You slow down and it slows down too. It's always just out of cannon range and it's always watching. Some of the men say it's a Navy spy ship. Others say it's another pirate crew that knows about the list. A few of them are whispering that it's Whisper himself, captaining a ghost ship with a hold that's full of your names and a crew of informants. That night, someone sets fire to the water barrels. That's when things truly fall apart. A fire on a ship is nightmare fuel. Even a small flame can become a floating funeral in just a matter of minutes. Luckily, it's caught early. The flames are stomped out, but the barrel is gone, cracked, smoking, and leaking water into the planks. You'll be able to survive for maybe 3 days without any fresh water. The captain demands names. No one answers, so he just chooses one. A man named Francis who was too slow to deny it and too drunk to fake his innocence. He's tied to the mast, accused of sabotage. He cries, he begs, he says he knows nothing. It doesn't matter. He's not punished. He's executed. You watch the crew swing from paranoia to relief to guilt, all in under a minute. Here's a fringe fact for you. Some pirate crews actually employed informants on purpose. Ships needed to have eyes and ears, especially on long hauls when tempers started to flare. The informant wasn't always punished. They were often protected if they served the right master. Loyalty wasn't about morals. It was about survival. There's a scholarly debate about whether pirates truly had organized spy networks among themselves, or whether betrayal was just a part of the job description. Some records suggest that pirates would work with local officials to tip them off about approaching Navy patrols. Others paint pirates as being chaotic, isolated bands with no interest in playing the long game. Your ship feels like it's both at once, wild and calculated, loyal and suspicious, a floating contradiction. You begin to suspect everyone, even Elias, even Brody. You don't trust anyone with your food, your weapons, or your secrets. You carve a little mark into the wall beside your hammock each morning. It's a tally of how many days you've managed to stay off the list. So far, you're up to 4. Then someone scratches a mark right through your third tally. Just one clean line. The next morning, a new sailor is missing. There was no splash heard, no note was left. His hammock just hangs there empty, swinging gently, as if someone just climbed out of it and never came back. The sea looks calm, but you know better. The ship that was behind you is gone now. It vanished sometime during the night. Maybe they turned back. Maybe they were never even real to begin with, but the damage has been done. No one trusts anyone anymore. And in a place like this, that's a kind of slow poison that you can't just bleed out. You sit on the deck, sleepless, your sword in your lap, watching the waves for any signs of movement. Elias joins you, but he doesn't speak. The silence between you is the only language that makes any sense now. Behind you, someone coughs in the dark. Someone else mutters about seeing a light on the water. You grip your blade even tighter. You don't know who sold out the crew. You don't know who will be next. But one thing is certain. This ship is sinking from the inside out. The first cannonball comes without any warning. There's no flag, no distant shout, no glimpse of sails on the horizon. Just a thunderclap of sound, a column of water erupting 10 feet off the port bow, and then a voice, your voice screaming naval ship. Before your brain even has a chance to catch up, the deck erupts into chaos. Men are scrambling, orders are being barked, ropes are being hauled and tied without a second thought. You've drilled for this. You feared this, but drills are not a battle. And nothing about this feels like practice. You can see it now, slicing through the morning fog like a blade. A white-sailed warship, the flag of a king snapping high above its deck. It's bigger than your ship, it's taller, it's heavier. You can practically hear the polished brass and the starch in its sails. And it's coming straight for you like it knows your name. This is the absolute worst-case scenario, not just because they outgun you, but because they hate you. The Navy doesn't see pirates as just criminals. They see you as a disease, something that needs to be eradicated. You've burned their ships, you've stolen their goods, you've humiliated their officers. This isn't about justice. It's about revenge. The captain bellows for more speed. You and Elias scramble up into the rigging. Your hands are raw as you haul on the sails. The ship groans as it leans into the wind, like even the planks themselves know what's coming. Another cannon fires. This one is closer. The splash coats you in sea spray. You don't look back. Looking back wastes time. Looking back gets you killed. But no matter how fast you move, the Navy is faster. Their hull cuts through the water cleanly. Their gunners fire in an organized rhythm. Boom, boom, boom. A deadly heartbeat. One shot grazes the stern, sending wood shrapnel flying everywhere. You hit the deck hard, your arms over your head. When you rise up again, the world is louder and smaller and it's spinning. The next order comes. Ready the guns. You've got fewer cannons. Half of your powder is damp. And one of your gunners has been blind in one eye since a drunken mishap that involved grog and a torch. You're not very hopeful, but you move anyway. That's what a battle does to you. It makes you move even when hope has already abandoned ship. The first pirate shot misses. The second one hits. It's a lucky strike. One of the enemy's sails tears and it starts flapping like a wounded bird. The crew lets out a cheer, but it's short-lived. The Navy fires back with a full broadside. You can feel the impact in your teeth. The ship rocks like it's trying to throw you right off of it. A chunk of the railing explodes. Someone screams. You see Elias go down. You crawl over to him, your heart in your throat. But it's just a graze. His arm is bleeding, but he's breathing. You drag him behind a barrel just as another volley of cannonballs shrieks overhead. Historically, Navy ships had a lot of advantages that pirates just couldn't match. They had better weapons, more men, and sturdier hulls. Pirates had to rely on speed, surprise, and fear. But when those things failed, it was like trying to fight a lion with a stick. Especially in the later years, as piracy became more of a hunted practice and less of a tolerated nuisance, governments poured a lot of resources into chasing down and exterminating crews just like yours. And some of the naval officers made it personal. There's no romance here. There are no clever tricks, just brute force. The two ships just circle each other like animals, their teeth bared with blood in the water. Your captain tries to outmaneuver them using every single trick he knows. Sudden turns, faked retreats, surprise broadsides. But they're not fooled. They've seen it all before. They answer every single one of his tricks with a wall of iron and fire. And then they close the gap. Grappling hooks fly through the air. The worst kind of fight begins, the boarding. The enemy swarms all over your deck. Their uniforms are stained with smoke, their sabers are raised. It's just chaos. Screams, steel, and blood. You see men fall, some from their wounds, and others just go overboard. You find yourself locked in combat with a man who is twice your size, and you only win because he trips on a loose plank and you manage to stab him through the gut as he falls. You don't feel heroic. You just feel sick. Elias is fighting up near the foremast. His face is twisted and his shirt is soaked in blood. Not all of it is his, maybe not even mostly his, but he's still on his feet. So are you. That's what counts. You don't know how long the fight lasts. 10 minutes, an hour. Time just breaks apart in a battle. What you do know is that the tide starts to turn, just barely. The Navy captain is wounded. His men start to falter. Your quartermaster roars like a beast, and he leads a countercharge that pushes them all back across the gangplank. One of the pirates drops a torch onto their deck just before they retreat. A fire leaps up fast. Someone screams to cut the ropes, and just like that, it's over. The Navy ship limps away, burning slowly, the smoke curling up like ink across the sea. Your ship is battered, torn, and bleeding from the seams. You've lost 4 men. 2 more are dying. The deck looks like a butcher's table. You sit down hard, your back against the mast. There's blood on your face and your fingers are twitching like they've forgotten that they're attached to you. Elias drops down beside you. His arm is bound with a strip of someone else's shirt. He doesn't speak. Neither do you. And here's the eerie part. After the Navy ship flees, the sea goes completely quiet. There's no wind, no gulls, just the crackle of the burned wood and the groans of the wounded. It feels wrong, like the ocean is just waiting to see what you'll do next. Here's a fringe fact for you. Some pirates believed that the Navy used spies to mark their ships with cursed symbols before an attack. Tiny knots of red thread would be tied into the rigging, or ashes would be smeared across the mast. You think that's just nonsense, until you see a red stain near the helm that wasn't there yesterday. There's a scholarly debate about just how effective pirate resistance really was against the Navy forces. Some argue that pirates would avoid conflict whenever they could, knowing that they were outgunned. Others claim that successful pirate crews would often defeat Navy ships through their cunning and their speed. Today, your crew won, but just barely. And the cost of that victory shows on every single face. That night, a silence falls over the ship. There are no songs, no games, no toasts, just the sound of repairs being made and shallow breathing. You lie there in your hammock, every single bruise on your body pulsing like a drumbeat. Your hands are still coated in blood. Some of it is yours and some of it isn't. You should feel proud, but all you really feel is numb. And somewhere out there, you know that another ship is coming. Bigger, better, and meaner. The Navy never forgets. They catch you while you're sleeping. Not during a battle, not during a storm or a raid, just on a quiet, still night when the sails are full and the sea is as flat as a piece of polished glass. You had almost started to believe that the worst was behind you. You were wrong. It starts with a whistle. Not a shout, not a bang, just a whistle. Low and slow. Then you hear the sound of boots on the deck, too many of them to count. By the time you're fully awake, your wrists are bound and there's a sword tip hovering right near your throat. The man who is holding it has that clean, stiff look that only Navy officers seem to be able to pull off, like someone ironed him right into his uniform. Behind him, more soldiers are swarming the ship, their weapons drawn, their expressions as cold as stone. There's no fight, no warning, just capture. You're dragged up onto the deck, where the rest of the crew has already been assembled, all lined up, tied and silent. Elias is there, kneeling, with blood on his temple. The captain is standing in the middle, his arms behind his back, his jaw clenched, his eyes locked on the officer like he's trying to memorize every single wrinkle in the man's smug, pale face. A trap, of course it was a trap. Whisper the list, the ship that had trailed you for days. This wasn't just some random patrol. It was a plan. You feel stupid for not having seen it sooner. You're angry at yourself and you're terrified. They make you kneel. The officer reads a proclamation in a bored, nasal voice. Something about piracy and treason and the theft of crown property and disturbing the peace of all civilized waters. You catch the words, to be tried and hanged in accordance with His Majesty's law. The crew just listens in a stunned silence. One man starts to sob. Another one lets out a long, hollow laugh. You just stare down at the deck and you try not to throw up. Pirates didn't always die in battle. Capture was actually pretty common. Navy ships could outrun you, they could outgun you, and sometimes they could outsmart you. When they took you alive, it wasn't out of mercy. It was for the theater of it all. Public trials, public hangings, a reminder to everyone who was watching that the crown had teeth, and they knew how to use them. You're loaded into a Navy brig that's about the size of a merchant's outhouse, and it's twice as filthy. They cram you in there with 10 other men, shoulder to shoulder, your ankles chained, the air thick with the smell of sweat and piss. It's dark. There are no windows, no airflow, just the occasional creak of the hull and the stink of fear. The next few days pass by like molasses. Time slows down, then it stops, then it starts to crawl backward. You sleep in short bursts, hunched over your own knees. You eat hardtack that tastes like sawdust and iron. You drink water from a wooden cup that has someone else's teeth marks on it. You try to speak to Elias, but they've separated you. Everyone looks the same in the dark, just tired and bruised and haunted. There's a rumor that starts to spread. The Navy is taking you all to Port Royal, the big one, the one with gallows that are tall enough to be seen from the sea. They like to hang pirates in batches there. It makes for better crowds. You hear someone say that they once hanged 6 men in a row and they just left the bodies up there for days. Someone else says that they dipped them in tar first to keep the birds away. You ask the man who is sitting beside you how long the trip will take. He just mutters, "Too long for the lucky ones, not long enough for the rest of us." You try to remember every single step that led you here. Being press-ganged onto a ship, being flogged for nothing, being starved, being betrayed, and somewhere in there, you became something worse. A pirate. A thing to be caught and tried and then displayed like some kind of a butcher's prize. You think of the town's folk who will all come to watch, the parents holding up their kids just to get a better view of your neck snapping like a piece of dry wood. You think of Elias, of Brody, of the boy who was flogged for stealing a single ring. You wonder how many of them will even make it to the trial. You wonder if you even want to. Here's a strange little fact for you. Some pirates, when they were captured, would confess to crimes that they hadn't even committed just to sound more impressive. They wanted to go down in history, to be remembered as legends instead of as losers. Others would beg and plead and weep for mercy. They'd swear that they were just passengers who had been forced on board. Some of them even were just passengers. It didn't matter. If you were caught on a pirate ship, you were guilty by proximity. One night, a guard stops at your cell and he mutters, "You've got a visitor." You're hauled out to a tiny little room where a man in a powdered wig and with ink-stained fingers is waiting with a stack of papers. He's a scribe. He wants your statement, your confession. He's offering you a deal, sort of. Cooperate, name some names, and maybe, just maybe, you'll get a stay of execution, maybe even a pardon. You just stare at him for a long moment. Then you smile and you ask, "You got any oranges?" He does not find that funny. There's a scholarly debate about how many pirates actually went to trial and how many were just executed on the spot. Some sources say that the trials were mostly for show, that they were foregone conclusions with scripted outcomes. Others suggest that some pirates were actually granted clemency if they turned into informers, or if they agreed to hunt down other pirates. You don't know which version of that is true. You're not sure that it even matters anymore. The ship rocks hard one night. Bad weather maybe. A few of the guards stumble. One of them drops a ring of keys right near your cell, and for one impossible second, the whole world just seems to hold its breath. But no one moves. Not you, not the others. You're all just too tired, too broken. Even freedom doesn't look like salvation anymore. It just looks like a longer delay. You spend the rest of the night just staring up at the ceiling, which is just black wood and dripping condensation. Every single creak sounds like a noose tightening. Every single splash sounds like a final breath. The next morning, you see land and beyond it, the gallows. The docks of Port Royal smell like brine and rot and something faintly metallic. Maybe it's blood, or maybe it's just the iron chains that are locked around your wrists. You're marched off the ship with the rest of the captured crew in a single file, your boots dragging, the manacles clinking in a rhythm like some kind of perverse sea shanty. The townspeople are already lining the streets. Some of them spit, some of them just stare. A few of them actually cheer. You can't tell which one is worse. Port Royal was once the most wicked place in the entire New World. It was a pirate haven, a paradise of sin and rum and a lot of poorly made decisions. But now it's the Crown's gleaming example of order. It's been cleaned up, smoothed out, purged of its pirate soul and replaced with gallows and lawmen and preachers who all speak with the same authority as cannon fire. You can feel it immediately. That smug, suffocating sense of righteousness. The kind that doesn't just want you to be dead, it wants you to be erased. You're told that your trial is scheduled for the next morning. It's going to be quick and efficient. They don't want pirates rotting away in their cells. They want them swinging in the sun. You've heard the phrase before. The king's justice waits for no man, especially not for one who has already been judged by the color of his sails. That night, you and Elias just sit against the wall, silent at first. Then he says, "You think they'll let us say anything before they do it?" You just shrug. Probably a few words, some kind of dramatic gesture, something to remind the crowd that you're not just a piece of meat. Elias nods like that's enough. Then he laughs, a low and bitter laugh. "I always thought I'd die at sea, not on a stage." You don't know what to say to that. Neither of you sleeps. The trial is more of a performance than anything else. The courtroom is packed. There are journalists, locals, officers in spotless uniforms. They call your names one by one, and each of you gets the exact same treatment. The charges are read aloud like they're scripture. There's a quick nod from the magistrate, and then you're given a moment to plead. You say "not guilty" just to say it. So do most of the others. One man starts screaming that he was never a pirate, that he was kidnapped and he was forced to scrub the decks. No one believes him. The judge doesn't even blink. The prosecution reads a list of your crimes. Some of them are true, some of them are exaggerated, and some of them you're pretty sure someone else did entirely. There's no jury, just the gavel, the judge, and the sentence that is already waiting behind his teeth. You glance out at the crowd and you see no sympathy, just curiosity and hunger. They want a spectacle. They came here for blood in the daylight. Historically, pirate trials were public events, part deterrent and part entertainment. The records show gallows that were packed with spectators, with children eating sugared fruit as the men swung. Sometimes, ministers were brought in to pray with the condemned. Other times, the convicted pirates were forced to read pre-written confessions, which were rehearsed like actors before an execution. And then there were the rare few who used their final moments to curse the court, the crown, and everyone else who was within earshot. Your sentence comes before noon. Guilty of piracy, theft, assault on officers of the crown, unlawful seizure of cargo, and generally wicked behavior unbecoming of a subject of His Majesty. That last phrase makes you laugh. The guards do not. Your execution is scheduled for the following morning. It's going to be fast, efficient, and it will be publicly posted. You get one last meal. It's bread, cheese, and something that's pretending to be stew. Elias offers you half of his. You don't ask him why. You just eat it in silence, savoring every single bite like it's worth more than gold. That night, a minister visits your cell. He's a small man with a huge book and watery eyes. He asks if you'd like to pray. Elias tells him to go bugger himself with a crucifix. The man leaves. You almost laugh again. Then Elias turns to you and he asks, "You think it was worth it?" And the answer should be no. It really should be no, but a part of you hesitates. You think of the open sea, the freedom, the wild nights, the laughter on the deck under a blood-orange sky, the wind in your face as you cut through the waves like a blade. The moments when, for just a second, you were more than you had ever been back on land. But then you think of the blood and the hunger and the betrayal and the whip and the fire and the way that men scream when they're dying. The way your stomach dropped when the Navy cannons roared. The look in a child's eyes on a ship that you raided. Pure fear. You think of all of that and you look Elias right in the eyes. "No," you say. He just nods. "Me neither." There's a fringe account about a pirate who, when he was facing execution, tricked the court by faking madness. He chewed off his own finger, he screamed about sea demons, and he claimed to be Neptune's bastard son. They actually delayed his hanging for months. Some people say he escaped. Others say they hanged him anyway, just upside down as a final joke. You wonder if you should have tried something like that. It's too late now. And you don't sleep. Not because you're scared, though you are, but because you want to remember every single second of it. You watch the moon drift through the bars of your cell. You listen to the wind. You count every single breath like it matters. In the morning, they come with the chains. They march you to the gallows in a line. The people cheer, some of them boo. One woman throws a flower at you. You step up onto the platform and the rope feels heavy around your neck. It's scratchy and it smells like damp rope and smoke. They ask you if you want to speak. You look out at the crowd. You see children and sailors and officers and a man who is picking his teeth with a knife. You take a breath and you say, "I was a fool, but I was free, more than any of you here." Then you spit. The executioner doesn't wait. The trapdoor opens. You don't die, or maybe you do just for a second. It's hard to say. One moment there's a rope around your throat, the crowd is holding its collective breath, and the executioner's hand is twitching toward the lever like a man who is just dying to do his job. The next moment there's chaos. The kind that doesn't start with a shout or a gunshot, but with a scream from the gallows crowd that turns into a wave of voices, all shouting at once. Then comes the blast. Boom. It's louder than any cannon you've ever heard. The gallows rocks. Dust fills the air. Something falls. Someone is yelling, "Fire!" And another voice is screaming, "Ambush!" Your eyes are stinging from the smoke. The rope loosens, but it doesn't fall. You're coughing, you're dizzy, you're still dangling, but your boots manage to find a broken board. It's just enough leverage to stay conscious. Then hands, familiar ones, grab your legs, they cut the rope, and they drag you backward through all the confusion. It's Elias. There's blood running down one side of his face, his shirt is torn, and his eyes are wild. "Come on." He yells, like you've just been asked to take a casual stroll, and not to flee your own execution. Around you, chaos is blooming like a bunch of rotten roses. The crowd has scattered. Some of them are running, some of them are looting the corpses that are already down. A portion of the gallows has collapsed, probably as a result of that first blast. Where there was once a stage, there's now just shattered timber and twisted rope. You see a body that's still swinging from a half-broken beam. It's not moving, he wasn't lucky. You don't know how it all happened. You don't stop to ask. Elias is pulling you through the smoke and the panic, and the guards are trying to regroup, but they can't see 5 feet ahead of them through the choking gray air. Somewhere, a pistol cracks. A musket answers. Then there's a second explosion, smaller this time, but it's closer. Pirates. They came back for you, or some of them at least. Later, someone will claim that it was Maud and her crew, slipping into the port under the cover of night. Another person will swear that it was a local smuggler's ring that had been bribed to raise hell as a distraction. A drunk who is ranting wildly in a tavern 2 weeks later will say that the devil himself came up through the ground and tore the gallows right down. You'll never know for sure. What matters is that you're running and bleeding and barely breathing, and somehow you're free. Elias drags you down alleyways that you barely remember seeing on your way into town. You leap over barrels, you duck through fences, you push through stunned bystanders who are dropping their baskets and their curses in equal measure. A horse rears up and bolts. A woman screams that the pirates are killing everyone. You try to shout back that you're not, at least not today. But your voice is gone, strangled by the rope and the smoke. Eventually, you reach a low building that's near the edge of the docks. Someone inside whistles a bird call, low and sharp, and the door opens. You tumble inside and you collapse. You think you might pass out. Elias slaps your face lightly. "No dying," he mutters. "Not yet." Inside there are others, fugitives just like you. Some of them are in Navy gear that's been stolen and is now bloodied. There's one girl with a bandolier of pistols. A boy with a sack of bread who looks like he's 12 and he's terrified. You recognize one or two of them from your old crew. Others are new. But the look is the same across every single face. We survived somehow for now. They have a skiff. It's small, it's leaky, but it floats. The plan is simple. They'll wait until nightfall. They'll slip out through the southern inlet, and they'll pray that no one is watching. If you're caught, it's the noose again if you're lucky. More likely, it's a musket ball to the gut and a slow bleed out in the mud. And so you wait, and every single minute feels like a year. Someone hands you some water. You drink it. It tastes like dirt and metal, but it's wet. Someone else gives you some bread. You can't chew it. Your throat is still too raw. You just swallow it and you try not to gag. You finally ask Elias what happened. He just shrugs. "I saw an opening. I took it. I had help." That's all he says. Historically, escapes like this were rare, but they weren't impossible. Port towns were messy places, the guards were corrupt, and the locals were indifferent. If someone wanted to spring a pirate from the gallows, they had to move fast and they had to move dirty, with more luck than they had skill. There are reports of bribed hangmen who would slip the knots loose, of gunpowder stashes that were planted under the scaffolds, and even of paid actors who would start fights just to cover a getaway. No two stories are ever quite the same, which only adds to the legend. Here's a weird little fringe fact for you. One pirate, John Halfjaw Hawkins, allegedly escaped his own hanging by biting right through the rope with his teeth. It took him 3 tries. He broke 2 of his molars, and he still had to fight his way out of the square. He died later that same week in a bar brawl over a spoon. You think about that and you wince. At least your teeth are all still intact. By nightfall, your group is down to just 6. 3 of them didn't make it. The guards got them, maybe, or the crowd. It doesn't really matter now. The docks are still being patrolled, but not as tightly as before. Everyone is busy cleaning up the mess, counting the bodies and looking for answers. You stick to the shadows. Your knees are buckling with every single step. The rope burns on your neck are itching like fire. Elias helps you get into the skiff and you push off. The water is silent, too silent. It's the kind of silence that screams in your ears. You row with shaking arms, your muscles are screaming, and you're praying to a god that you never even believed in. Behind you, Port Royal is smoldering quietly under the moonlight, its gallows hanging empty. For now, you make it past the rocks, you make it past the bay, and then, just like that, you're at sea again. You're free, but you're not safe. Not yet. The ocean doesn't welcome you back. It just tolerates you, like a sullen host that's allowing an unwanted guest to sleep on its floorboards just until sunrise. You and Elias drift in that leaky skiff for the better part of 2 days, with nothing but a sack of moldy hardtack, a flask of brackish water, and the occasional gull that swoops overhead like it's considering pecking your eyes out. You take turns rowing and bailing. Elias jokes that you've officially earned the worst spa experience in the entire Caribbean. You try to laugh, but it just comes out as a rasp. Your throat still burns from the gallows rope. There's no plan, no destination, just water and sky and that distant sound in your ears that might be the wind, or it might just be your heartbeat slowly unraveling. By the 3rd day, the sun is relentless. It drills into your scalp like it's trying to find your thoughts. Salt crusts on your skin. Your lips split open. You start seeing things. A sail on the horizon. A ship's bell. Elias telling a joke that turns into a hymn. You sleep in short, minutes-long bursts, half aware, one eye open, your hand still clutching a knife out of pure habit. It's not fear anymore. You're past fear now. What's left is just reflex. On the 4th day, a ship appears. It's real this time, low in the water, fast, with no colors flying. Your heart lifts up and then it sinks. It could be pirates, it could be slavers, it could be the same damn Navy patrols that you just escaped from. You don't wave, you don't shout, you just sit there, holding your breath while Elias squints into the sun and he mutters, "It's better to die on a deck than in this bathtub." They see you, of course they do. The ship swings around towards you like a predator that's just spotted dinner with legs. You can hear shouting and ropes and orders being barked. A grappling hook clinks into the side of the skiff and it drags you in. Men haul you on board. They have rough hands and sharp eyes. One of them pokes you in the ribs. You flinch. He laughs. Then a voice you recognize says, "Drop that one. He's with me." Maud, of course it's her. She appears at the rail like a ghost that's been conjured by your sheer exhaustion. Her coat is dark, her boots are polished, and her hat is even more ridiculous than you remember. Her expression doesn't change. There's no warmth, no surprise, just calculation. "What happened to the gallows?" she asks. You swallow. "It didn't take." She just smirks. "Lucky you." They feed you, they bathe you, and they let you collapse into a real bunk. It's a hammock, technically, but it feels like heaven. For a while, all you do is sleep and wake up and then sleep again. Elias tells the story of your escape over and over, each time with a little more flair. You don't correct him. You're too tired to be humble. Eventually, Maud invites you to her quarters. It's not fancy, just neat. There are charts and knives and a bottle of something that's been aged and is amber colored. She pours 2 fingers of it into a tin cup and she slides it over to you without a word. You drink it without asking what it is. It burns the pain right out of your throat for the first time in days. You too, she says, gesturing to you and Elias, have a choice. You raise an eyebrow, Elias just groans. I can drop you off at Tortuga, she says, or I can keep you on board. We've got room. You've got sea legs, and I prefer to have a crew who have stared at a noose and have come back swinging. It's tempting. A ship, a job, a second life. It's not much to think about, really. But a part of you wonders, what's the point? You've been a pirate. You've starved and you've fought. You've bled, you've killed, and you've wept. You have seen men who have been gutted for their lies and hanged for their truths. You've buried your friends. You've betrayed strangers. You've lived a life that most people only fear in stories, and you barely manage to live through it. Do you go back? Do you start all over again, or do you just stop? That night you sit on the deck alone, the sea stretched out before you like a road that you can't decide if you want to walk down again. The moon is full, the air is cool. Behind you, Maud's crew is singing quietly. They're not drunk, they're not wild, they're just there, steady, alive. Elias sits down beside you. He smells like salt and rum and whatever bruised herbs they use as soap on this boat. So, he says, what do we do now? You just shrug. The same thing we've always done. He laughs. Which is what exactly? And you say, keep not dying. That gets a real laugh out of him. It's a tired one, but it's real. Historically, some pirates did get second chances. They got pardons, new ships, new names. Some of them returned to the sea. Some of them retired quietly. Others just couldn't stay away, and they died trying to relive their old glories. The cycle never really ended. It just moved forward. There's a fringe story about a pirate who faked his own death at Port Royal, married a widow in Barbados, and then spent the rest of his life baking bread. Another tale tells of a woman captain who sailed under a new name for 20 more years before she just vanished with her entire crew into a thick fog. They're just legends, half-truths. You wonder which version of that you're stepping into now. Maud lets you stay. There's no ceremony, no welcome speech, just a new hammock, a fresh blade, and a nod. That's how it works. You're a part of the ship now again, but you're not the same. And the sea, as always, is watching. You start to call it the quiet life, but only in your own head, and only with the sort of bitter sarcasm that comes from surviving things that should have killed you twice over. Life aboard Maud's ship isn't easy, but it's a long way from the chaos of your last crew. There's no crack of a whip echoing off the mast. There are no gambling brawls that end in blood. There's no stench of rot coming from beneath the deck. Maud runs a tight ship, one that's built on rules and respect, and you almost don't know what to do with that. Almost. Your new job is maintenance. You work on the ropes, the sails, the wood patches, things you can do quietly, away from most of the other people. Elias is still there, of course. He's now the ship's unofficial quartermaster, though he insists that his real job is just supervising the rum allocation and providing moral support. The crew likes him. They're wary of you at first. You're the ghost who escaped the noose. You're the one who saw the inside of a Navy gallows and just walked away. That makes people nervous and superstitious and curious. Eventually, the stares start to fade and they're replaced by something else. Nods, jokes, half-shared meals. It's not trust, not yet, but it's close. Weeks pass and then months. You raid a few ships, but nothing big. Maud prefers targets that have minimal resistance. Small merchant sloops, privateers who get a little too bold. Her goal isn't gold, it's survival. Food, powder, medicine. She avoids the Navy patrols, she cuts deals in hidden coves, and she trades with locals who don't care what flag you fly as long as you pay. It's less of an adventure and more like logistics. Still, it keeps you afloat and it keeps you alive. One night you dock in a tiny port on an unmarked island. It's just a few huts, a dock, and a man who sells rum by the barrel. It's your first real chance in months to just stand on land. Your legs feel like jelly. You nearly fall right on your face, and Elias laughs so hard he drops his pipe in the sand. You wander into the village and you buy a sweet orange with a single copper coin. You eat it slowly, just sitting there on a crate, the juice dripping down your chin. It's the best thing you've ever tasted. Historically, most pirates didn't die in battle. They died from disease or starvation or infection. Even the most successful crews often met their end from a simple scratch that went septic, or a rat bite that turned into a fever. You think of all the ways you could have died. Famine, hanging, drowning, fire, gunshot, betrayal. You wonder how many more are still waiting for you. Maud calls a meeting on the deck that night. It's a vote. She's got word of a potential prize, a treasure ship out of Havana, heavy with silver, and it's bound for the Spanish Main. It's a big risk, but a big reward. Everyone gets a say. You vote yes, not because you care about the silver, but because a part of you wants to feel alive again, to remember what it was like to grip a blade with a purpose. The raid is brutal. The ship is guarded not by soldiers, but by mercenaries, hardened men with cruel smiles and no fear. You take one of them down by tackling him right into the hold. The two of you go rolling through gunpowder barrels and broken crates. You don't remember the killing blow, just the blood and the screaming and then the silence. In the end, you win, but just barely. You take the ship, you get the silver, but you lose 4 men. One of them is Elias. He was shot through the gut while he was covering your retreat. You drag him back to the deck, you're screaming for help, but you just know. He looks up at you, his eyes wide, and he says, "You still owe me for that orange." Then he dies. There's no final speech, no last breath sighing through poetic lips, just that. And then he's gone. You bury him at sea with the others. Maud says a few words. You say nothing. You can't. Your throat is closed. Your eyes are dry. And everything inside of you feels like it's caving in. That night, you just sit at the bow of the ship with Elia's pipe in your hand. It doesn't light anymore. You keep it anyway. There's an old belief that if you die at sea, your soul stays with the ship. You're not sure if it's true or not, but you swear that you can hear his laugh sometimes when the wind is just right. Here's a final, strange fact for you. One pirate captain, after he lost his entire crew in a storm, sailed alone for 2 whole years, just talking to their ghosts. People called him mad, but they also say that he never lost another battle after that. Sometimes, madness is just grief that's wearing a different coat. You stay on board Maud's ship for another year. You get stronger and quieter and more respected. One day she asks you if you want your own command, a sloop, your own crew, a compass, and your own freedom. You say no, not because you're afraid, but because you've finally learned that freedom isn't found at the helm of a ship. It's found in surviving long enough to be able to choose what happens next. Eventually, you dock at an island that's far away from any Navy patrols, far away from any ports that might whisper your name. You disembark. Maud just watches you without any questions. She just nods once and she says, "Don't die stupid." You promise her you'll try. You live in a hut near the water now. You fix boats, you tell stories, and you eat fruit. Sometimes someone will ask you about the rope scar on your neck. You just say, "It's from when I tried to kiss a Navy girl." That usually gets a laugh. At night, you walk along the beach. The sea still calls to you like always, but this time you don't answer. You've had your fill. And that, my dear friends, is the story of your horrible, cursed, sweaty, seasick, blade-scarred life as a pirate. You didn't die at sea or in a battle or on the gallows. You died and you came back and you just kept moving forward one splintered day at a time. That's not glory. That's survival, which in pirate terms is the exact same thing. So if you're still awake, congratulations. You just lived through something that most people wouldn't survive for 10 minutes. If your pillow now feels extra soft, that's because you've earned it. Now close your eyes, breathe in deep, and just drift away, like a stolen ship into a moonlit cove.